Chapter 93. On the second day after the dragon seizing tournament, I met up with Yang Shilong and the rest at the Metaphysics Association. Chairman Su also came to send us off. When Yang Shilong and the rest arrived a few days ago, Chairman Su also requested to go with us to the Fire God Temple. Yang Shilong agreed, but the exchange wasn't over yet. Chairman Su couldn't leave for a while, so he could only send us off regretfully. Shenzhen wasn't too far from Shenangjia. If we took a plane, it would only take 2 to 3 hours. If we left in the morning, we would definitely arrive by noon. Yang Shilong and the other two had been very impatient. I thought they would definitely choose to travel by plane. Unexpectedly, after saying goodbye to Chairman Su and leaving the Metaphysics Association, Yang Shilong and the rest drove 2 cars over and said that they would drive there. I felt strange and asked Yang Shilong. He didn't explain but asked me in reply, although our cultivation realms are different, we are all in the Geomaster realm. Do you know the meaning of the word Earth in the word Geomaster? The word Earth in Geomaster? I was stunned as I hadn't thought of this question before. Seeing that I didn't answer, Yang Shilong continued, Geomasters aren't just about geography, they also need to obtain power from the Earth. Your current realm isn't high enough, so it might be hard for you to understand. However, when you go back to the headquarters and pass the dragon luring realm, you should understand the true meaning of a Geomaster. In short, after we Geomasters step onto the path of cultivation, things like planes have nothing to do with us. After saying that, he arranged for me to get in a car with him. The other 2 directors, Fang Xing and Lu Jing, got in another car. After getting in the car, I glanced at the back. The seats at the back of the car were all reclined. From the trunk to the back, there were tents, sleeping bags, and other supplies. It seemed that Yang Shilong and the rest had made thorough preparations. After setting off, I was still thinking about what Yang Shilong said. Previously, I had some guesses about his realm and even thought that he was the legendary Heavenly Master. However, according to what he said, he should still be in the Geomaster realm. After thinking for a while, I asked Yang Shilong, Uncle Yang, according to what you said, we Geomasters shouldn't take planes. Won't it be troublesome if we travel far in the future? Is there no way to solve this? Yang Shilong grinned as he drove. There's naturally a solution, and it's very simple. You just need to reach the Celestial Master realm. One can only take a plane after reaching the Heavenly Master realm? No. Yang Shilong suddenly turned to look at me. When you reach Heaven's Master level, you don't need to take the plane anymore. I was confused by what he was saying. One moment, he said that the problem of taking a plane could only be solved when one reached the Sky Master realm. The next moment, he said that there was no need to take a plane when one reached the Sky Master realm. It sounded contradictory. I wanted to ask more, but Yang Shilong turned around and smiled mysteriously. He didn't say anything else. Feeling helpless, I had to give up. The car left the city and quickly turned onto the highway, speeding all the way to the north. Although Yang Shilong wasn't young, he still had a lot of energy and stamina. Along the way, besides stopping at the service area for lunch, he didn't stop to rest at all. He also didn't let me drive for him. He drove alone for more than 10 hours. When we arrived at Shenangjia, it was late at night. I took them to the hotel we had stayed in the last time. After we settled down at night, I purposely walked around and asked the hotel staff about what had happened. Last time, I had booked a room for half a month with Director Lu's group. In the end, no one came back. Someone in the hotel would definitely notice. Moreover, so many people had gone missing. Although no one came to look for me, I didn't know the specific situation, so I wasn't sure. In the end, I asked a few staff members, but I didn't get any valuable clues. In the end, I found the waiter I had met in the bar last time. That guy still remembered me. He greeted me as soon as he saw me. He smiled and asked me if I had gained anything from the last expedition. He even asked me about the fat guy from last time. I sat down and ordered 2 glasses of wine. Then, I asked him with a smile, I didn't go with them last time. I had something to do, so I left first. I haven't heard from them since. Did you notice that the group of people that went with me came back? About that, I don't really remember, the guy said vaguely, but he was smiling slyly at me. Seeing his expression, I curled my lips. I took out 500 kwai from my wallet and handed it over. The guy took the money, then slammed the table and said, You asked the right person. Last time, a dozen of you booked a room for half a month, but no one came back. This kind of thing isn't rare in a hotel, so not many people care about it. I talked to you and treated you as a friend. Then, I went to the front desk and asked. That's how I got the situation. So, I was the only one that escaped? I thought for a bit, then asked him. So many people went missing. Did the police or something come to investigate? The waiter shook his head. I didn't see the police come to investigate. However, a few days ago there was a middle-aged uncle who came here to ask about you guys. Middle-aged uncle? He asked about us? When exactly was it? What did he look like? I hurriedly asked. Last weekend, 2 days ago. I don't know what he looked like, but he was wearing tattered clothes. He looked like someone from the countryside, and when he spoke, he had a northern accent. It was the accent of Shandong and Hunan. I was surprised and changed to my hometown's dialect. The waiter immediately nodded and said, Yes, that's the accent. Someone who spoke my hometown's dialect? Chief Lu and the others were from Kaifeng, and the accent there was different from mine. Moreover, if they came to find Chief Lu and the others, they must be from the city. It was impossible for them to wear tattered clothes and speak a dialect. If they spoke the dialect from my hometown, they must have come to find me or the fatty. However, I didn't go missing, so they didn't need to come here to find me. The only possibility was that they came to find the fatty. However, the fatty left his hometown when he was in high school, and I didn't hear that he had any relative. If they came to find the fatty and spoke the dialect from my hometown, I couldn't think of anything. At this moment, the waiter excitedly asked us, What do you do? Do you go to the mountains to rob tombs? He swore that he wouldn't tell anyone. Looking at his excited face, I couldn't help but laugh. It was normal to rob tombs in the mountains, but I had never heard of a big tomb in a primitive forest like Shenangjia. I wasn't in a good mood and gave him a stack of money. I gave him my phone number and asked him to pay attention to this case. If he saw the people who had been with me or if someone else asked about this case, he should call me. Since we had money to open the way, the waiter agreed without any hesitation. After we settled this matter, it was already midnight. I didn't dare to linger and returned to my room to rest. The next morning, the 4 of us gathered together. After eating breakfast, we carried the supplies we had prepared and set off into the depths of the mountain. The last time we entered the mountain, Chief Lu brought a group of special forces, tents, sleeping bags, and all kinds of supplies. I didn't have to carry them at all, so the journey was very easy. But this time, I had to carry dozens of kilograms of things on my back, and walk forward step by step. It wasn't as easy as last time. Fortunately, after I had entered the Earth Master realm, my body was much stronger than ordinary people. It wasn't too difficult to carry these things. This time, our speed wasn't much different from the last time. After one morning, we arrived at the Yellow Spring River. Just like me at that time, Yang Shilong and the other 2 didn't notice the abnormality of the river. Instead, they raised their heads to look at the canyon not far away. They couldn't help but show joy on their faces as they asked me, Is this the remnant of the true dragon vein? I nodded, but my eyes were focused on the river in front of me. The last time I came back, the river was almost dry, so I climbed along the rock wall at the source. But now, from the surface of the river seemed to have returned to its original flow. The rock wall that I could climb must have been submerged under the water again. Chapter 94. Yang Shilong and the others excitedly discussed the dragon vein in the canyon for a long time. Then, they turned around and asked me casually, "How do we cross this river? Is there a bridge nearby?" I shook my head. "There's no bridge, and this river is really strange." "Strange?" Yang Shilong was surprised. "Tell me the details." Then, I told him about the last time we sent people to cross the river and how they disappeared mysteriously. After I finished, Feng Xing, one of the two directors, frowned and asked, "Disappeared? Could there be some kind of water monster in the water?" As soon as he said that, Yang Shilong gestured for us not to talk. He walked to the riverside and looked at the water for a long time. Then, he shook his head with a puzzled face. "The water has a lot of yin energy, but water belongs to the yin attribute. It's not wrong to have a lot of yin energy. Besides that, I don't see anything strange." The three of them discussed for a while. Eventually, Yang Shilong turned to me and asked, "How did you cross the river last time?" I considered for a while, then told them about how I had gotten the villagers to cross the river. At first, Yang Shilong and the others looked normal. However, when I talked about the large number of floating corpses flowing down the river and the floating corpse bridge, the three of them looked shocked. When I told him about the black zombies and the golden head that popped up from the bottom of the lake, Yang Shilong was shocked. He looked at me in disbelief. After telling them everything in one breath, I added, "The floating corpse bridge only appears on the 1st and 15th day of each lunar month. Today is the 28th day of the 9th lunar month. If we can't find another way to cross the river, we will have to rest by the riverside for 2 days. We will cross the river the day after tomorrow." Yang Shilong thought for a long time. In the end, he decided to set up camp by the riverside. We would use these 2 days to try other method. If it didn't work, we would have to wait for the floating corpse bridge to appear 2 days later. I was just a guide, and Yang Shilong was the leader. Since he had made the decision, we had to follow him. We set up camp by the riverside to rest. For the next 2 days, Yang Shilong and the other two stayed by the riverside to study the strange features of the river and discuss other ways to cross the river. I wasn't interested in their topic. Ever since I saw the terrifying golden head at the bottom of the river, I was filled with respect for the river. If it wasn't for the fatty who had disappeared in the fire god temple, I wouldn't have been willing to come back even if I was beaten to death. As for studying the strangeness of the river, it was better to leave this matter to an expert like Yang Shilong. In these 2 days, I basically stayed in my own tent, thinking about whether or not I should borrow Yang Shilong and the rest's power to summon the fire god temple again. Fatty had disappeared into the fire god temple. If he wanted to find Fatty, he had to find the fire god temple first. Back then, I saw the method director Lu used to summon the fire god temple. As long as I can find someone like the fatty who has the experience and a sacrificial person, I should be able to summon the fire god temple again. It will definitely be difficult for me to do this alone, but using Yang Shilong and the power of the Metaphysics Union to summon the fire god temple is almost effortless. The only problem was that the last time I stood outside the fire god temple, I couldn't enter. Even if I summoned the fire god temple this time, would I be able to enter? If I couldn't enter, then I could only ask someone else to go in and find Fatty. However, the people from the Metaphysics Union probably wouldn't do their best to find him. After thinking about it for 2 days, I couldn't confirm if I should tell Yang Shilong and the rest, so I could only take it one step at a time. When I arrived at the fire god temple, I would observe the situation before deciding on my next step. Very quickly, 2 days passed. At noon on the 30th of September, we packed our luggage. The 4 of us stood by the river, waiting for the floating corpses to appear. At around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the first black dot appeared in the distant river. When the first corpse floated in front of us, countless black dots appeared in the distance, forming a black line. Since I had explained the situation before, Yang Shilong and the rest weren't too shocked. They only observed the corpse on the surface of the river and nodded. It really is a soulless corpse. After studying it for a while, we started swimming towards the river. Along the way, countless corpses floated past us. Even though it was the second time I encountered this situation, I still couldn't help but feel scared. Since we set out early this time, it was still daytime when we reached the upper reaches of the river. At this time, there wasn't a floating corpse bridge at the upper reaches of the river. However, every 10 seconds or so, a corpse would float up from the bottom of the river and slowly float downstream. We sat by the river and slowly waited. Gradually, the night sky enveloped us, and the sky became dark. The last time I came here, it was the 15th of the lunar calendar. After the sky turned dark, the moonlight shone brightly, and everything on the river could be seen clearly. However, this time, it was the first day of the lunar calendar. There was no trace of the moon in the sky, and we were in the depths of the forest, so when night fell, the sky was dark, and only the light from the flashlights in our hands could be seen. I held the flashlight and shone it towards the middle of the river. There were continuously dried corpses that floated up from the bottom of the river. Under the light of the flashlight, it was as if their entire bodies were emitting black light. It looked extremely scary. Strangely enough, those corpses were soaking in the water, but none of them had swollen up. Quite the contrary, they all looked dry and shriveled. They didn't look like corpses that had died in the water. Instead, they looked like dried corpses that had been blown away by the wind in the desert. We looked at the corpses on the surface of the river until midnight. All of a sudden, a bubbling sound came from the water. We hurried to use the flashlight to see. There were a lot of bubbles and white foam rising from the surface of the water. This situation lasted for around 2 minutes. Then, the bubbles and white foam disappeared, replaced by a sea of black corpses. Now, I knew that the corpses that made up the floating corpse bridge had appeared all at once. The situation in the water looked like a massive school of black fish that had suddenly jumped into a small pond. All of a sudden, they rose from the bottom of the water to the surface, crowding together. It looked strange and absurd. Just like Yang Shilong and the others, it was the first time we had seen such a strange scene. We stood by the river and held the flashlight in our hands. We kept silent and didn't know what to say. Around 1 or 2 minutes later, a layer of corpses appeared on the surface of the water, blocking the entire river and forming a floating corpse bridge. Although Yang Shilong was interested in the golden head underwater, the most urgent matter at hand was to cross the river. Shortly after, he reacted. He waved his hand and said to us, "We shouldn't delay any longer. Let's cross the river." After saying that, he took a step forward and directly jumped onto the floating corpses in the river. The 3 of us followed behind and were about to jump onto the floating corpses. Right at this moment, I heard footsteps next to me. Instinctively, I lifted my head and saw a shadow dashing past us. It jumped onto the bridge of floating corpses. Then, it didn't stop and directly ran to the other side of the river. I wasn't the only one who was startled. Yang Shilong and the others were also startled. They couldn't react in time and just let the shadow run past them. Before we could react, the shadow had reached the center of the river. The Yellow Spring River was a deserted place. After we had left the scenic area, we hadn't met anyone along the way. How could we coincidentally meet someone here? Before I could figure it out, Fang Xing, who was standing next to me, shouted, "Who are you? Why are you following us?" I was surprised. Did this person follow us here? After Fang Xing shouted, the shadow stopped at the center of the river. However, it immediately moved to the other side of the river. Fang Xing was enraged. He took out a magic tool that looked like a folding fan and raised his hand to draw the Tao energy. Yang Shilong, who was standing not far from him, raised his hand to stop him. This place was full of floating corpses, and I had told them about the black zombie incident. No matter what, we shouldn't use our Tao energy here. We couldn't be sure if something unexpected would happen. Fang Xing reluctantly stopped. We could only stare at the shadow crossing the river. It was strange that after the person reached the other side of the river, he didn't hurry to leave. Instead, he turned around and looked at us from a distance. Yang Shilong and the others had prepared excellent equipment for this trip. For example, their flashlights were military-grade LED flashlight. Even though they were dozens of meters away from the river, they could still see the person's face clearly. So, the moment the man turned around, I saw his face. Then, I was completely shocked. Chapter 95. The fatty's father didn't die. That's impossible. At that time, I was standing in front of Lin Aching and saw him stab the dagger into his own chest. How could he not be dead? But if he was dead, who was standing on the other side of the river? Also, why did the fatty tell me that he suspected that his father wasn't dead? At that time, I thought that the fatty was just imagining things, so I didn't take it to heart. Now I was completely dumbfounded. Lin Aching stood on the other side of the river. Under the light of the flashlight, his face didn't show any expression. His eyes were just as dull as before. After looking at us for a while, he turned around and disappeared into the darkness. Who was that? Have you seen him before? After Lin Aching disappeared, Yang Shilong turned to ask me with a gloomy face. I kept silent for a while, then shook my head. It was too dark. I didn't see him clearly. The fatty's father's case was too strange. Instinctively, I didn't want to tell anyone. Yang Shilong frowned and seemed to want to ask something. Fang Xing, who was standing on the side, opened his mouth first. He said angrily, "These 2 days, I felt that something was wrong. I always felt that someone was spying on us, but I couldn't find any obvious signs. I didn't expect it to be that person. I don't know his purpose yet, but his strength isn't bad. At least, he's not weaker than me." I was surprised. Not weaker than Fang Xing? He's the director of the Metaphysics Union. His strength is at least on the same level as Chairman Su. He's at the peak of Geomasters. How could the fatty's father have this kind of strength? Although I hadn't started cultivating that year, from the talismans that old he and the others used, I could roughly guess that they were at the Geomaster realm, which was similar to my current strength. At most, they were 1 realm higher than me. At that time, old he's strength wasn't just 1 realm higher than the fatty's father's. Based on this, the fatty's father's strength was at the same level as mine when I was in university. It had only been a few years, and the fatty's father was getting old. Even if he was still alive, how could he have this kind of strength? Was I wrong? Or, did this person just look like the fatty's father? But how could there be such a coincidence? A person who looked exactly like the fatty's father and happened to be a feng shui master, and I even met him? After thinking for a long time, my brain was still a mess. As for Yang Shilong and the others, they began to discuss that person's strength and speculate about that person's objective. They were all worried about whether that person had also discovered the true dragon's vein. With this conjecture, Yang Shilong and the others' expressions became even more gloomy. Fearing that something might happen to the true dragon vein, they all sped up and rushed to the other side of the river. Perhaps it was because there was no moon in the sky, but no matter if it was that person or us, when we crossed the river, the floating corpses didn't move at all. We smoothly reached the riverbank. On the way here, Yang Shilong and the others were still very interested in the golden head at the bottom of the river, but now they couldn't care less. After reaching the other side of the river, they hurriedly continued forward, trying to find traces of the person from before. However, the strange thing was that no matter how hard we searched, that person seemed to have disappeared. There was not a single trace left. Helplessly, Yang Shilong told us to go back to the riverside to set up camp and rest. Because of this delay, when we returned to the river, the water had returned to its calm state. There wasn't a single corpse to be seen. It was as if the bridge of corpses had never appeared. Moreover, the golden head was nowhere to be seen. I didn't even know if it had appeared this time or not. After setting up camp, Due to the appearance of that person, we couldn't relax as much as we had in the past few days. Yang Shilong arranged for Lu Jing and Fang Xing to be on night watch. He said that at least one of them had to be awake at night to ensure our safety. Usually, a geomancy master wouldn't be affected too much if he didn't sleep for 1 or 2 days. However, the following journey wasn't going to last for 1 or 2 days. We had to arrange a reasonable plan to ensure the smooth journey. I also volunteered to be on night watch. However, before Yang Shilong could say anything, Fang Xing curled his lips and told me, "With your current power, I can't be at ease. You should go back to sleep." Feeling helpless, I had to return to my tent to sleep. After returning to my tent, I got into my sleeping bag and tossed and turned. I couldn't fall asleep no matter how hard I tried. What had happened today had shocked me so much that I couldn't calm down no matter how hard I tried. However, after thinking about it for a while, I suddenly realized that if that person was really the fatty's father, regardless of how he came back to life, it would be good for me if he suddenly appeared here. Fatty had disappeared here, so Fatty's father must have come here to save Fatty. Previously, I was worried that I wouldn't be able to enter the Fire God Temple, and the people from the Metaphysics Association weren't reliable. But now, the Fatty's father was here. As long as I could open the Fire God Temple, the Fatty's father would be able to enter. He would try his best to find the Fatty. With that in mind, I suddenly felt more confident about rescuing the Fatty. The night passed without incident. The next morning, Fang Xing, who was on night watch, woke us up. We packed up and continued to move forward. After crossing the Yellow Spring River, we entered the Ghost Valley. The landscape of the Crimson Crescent Gorge was revealed in front of us. As geomancers, Yang Shilong and the others couldn't help but be attracted. They started to talk about the landscape in front of us. Yang Shilong could even see the aura of the embryonic dragon vein. He was an experienced geomancer. I had discovered the embryonic dragon vein after I had left the Ghost Valley. Who would have thought that Yang Shilong would be able to sense the aura of the embryonic dragon vein before he even entered the gorge? Of course, it was also because he knew that there was a remnant of a true dragon vein in front of him. After talking about the true dragon vein, the atmosphere in the team relaxed a little. We didn't mention the person we had met last night. However, this relaxed atmosphere didn't last long. When we entered the gorge, Yang Shilong and the others' faces turned serious. After taking a few steps, Fang Xing asked in bewilderment, "Is it my imagination, or something? Why do I feel such dense yin qi in a canyon with such good feng shui?" Yang Shilong shook his head and frowned. "It's not your imagination. This gorge is strange. Guys, you should be careful." Then, he turned to me and asked, "Did we encounter these ghosts the last time we came here?" I nodded and told them about the large number of ghosts in this gorge. However, I didn't tell them the number that we saw the last time. After all, I had collected all the ghosts from the last time. Although there were more ghosts coming out of the gorge, I wasn't sure how many there were. I could only give them a vague number. As soon as Fang Xing and Lu Jing heard that it was just a group of ghosts, their faces relaxed. Although ghosts were hard to deal with, to people at their realm, killing a ghost wasn't as difficult as killing an ant. That was why they didn't put ghosts in their eyes. When we entered the depths of the gorge, we saw a large group of ghosts. It looked like they had formed a small army. Yang Shilong and the others became tense again. In fact, the number of ghosts was much smaller than the first time I had come here. They were only 1/5 of the number from the last time. Even so, there were more than 10,000 of them. As soon as they saw us, the ghosts that didn't have much consciousness started to approach us. Seeing this, Yang Shilong quickly calmed down. He arranged for the 4 of us to guard one direction each and began to eliminate the ghosts that were coming at us. After that, I finally saw the real power of Yang Shilong and the others. Fang Xing, who was standing next to me, was holding the folding fan magic tool I had seen yesterday. He waved it casually, and a large number of ghosts disappeared. Lu Jing and Yang Shilong weren't inferior either. It was easy for them to deal with the ghosts. I was the only one who was struggling. However, I had stored enough talismans these days. With the support of these talismans and the help of Yang Shilong and the others from time to time, these ghosts couldn't do anything to me for the time being. While eliminating the ghosts, I felt a little heartache. If I could send so many ghosts to Tong Tong's jade bracelet, her power would increase. Unfortunately, I didn't dare to bet on Yang Shilong and the others. I couldn't let Tong Tong take the risk. I could only reluctantly give up on these ghosts. After 2 or 3 hours, the Tao energy in my body was almost used up. Finally, the number of ghosts in front of me became less and less. The previous army was gone, and only a few ghosts were left. They came to me one by one, seeking their deaths. I gritted my teeth. As I was about to eliminate the last of the ghosts, a vague ghost appeared in front of me. It swayed and walked toward me. At first, I didn't pay attention to it. Out of habit, I wanted to eliminate it. However, when the talisman in my hand was about to touch the ghost, I found that the ghost's face was somewhat familiar. When I took a closer look, I was startled. That ghost was none other than President Liu. After a person died, if they were lucky enough to form a ghost, they would have the same appearance as when they died. This Yin soul should be the Yin soul that was formed after Chief Liu's death. However, Chief Liu had disappeared from the Fire God Temple. How could a ghost come here? Moreover, if Chief Liu was dead, what about the fatty and the others? Were they also dead? Chapter 96. At this moment, there weren't many ghosts left. I didn't need to look for them. I just needed to lift my head to see their appearances. However, except for Chief Liu, I couldn't find anyone else who had traveled with us. Did I get the wrong person? I turned around and saw that the ghost that looked exactly like Chief Liu was still in front of me. It didn't want to leave me alone. I studied him for a while to confirm that he was Chief Liu's ghost. Then, I used a talisman to destroy him. After I had destroyed Chief Liu's ghost, the others had also destroyed all the other ghosts. The 4 of us regrouped and continued on our way. Along the way, we encountered a few scattered ghosts. Yang Shilong and the others didn't even need to take action. They killed them easily. While walking, they discussed the reason why there were so many ghosts here. I anxiously watched the ghosts that we encountered. However, I didn't see anyone else until we got out of the canyon. I heaved a sigh of relief when I didn't see the fat man's ghost. However, the appearance of Chief Liu's ghost meant that they were in danger. I was more worried about the fat man. After we got out of the canyon, the terrain of the embryonic breath dragon vein appeared. Yang Shilong and the others gave up on guessing the reason why there were so many ghosts. Instead, they focused on observing the embryonic breath dragon vein. It was the same as the last time we came here. It was much safer along the way. Although it was harder to walk, we didn't encounter any other dangers. Moreover, the further we went, the more obvious the signs of the true dragon vein became. Yang Shilong and the others became excited. When we got close to the Fire God Temple, the terrain of the ancestral dragon vein also appeared. Yang Shilong and the other 2 were excited. Fang Xing even said that he had sensed the aura of the true dragon vein. There must be a true dragon vein in front of us. Yang Shilong wasn't so sure. However, he smiled and urged us to move faster. Eventually, after following the ancestral dragon vein for another day, the forest in front of us suddenly widened. We saw a lush green grassland with a murmuring stream. We had finally arrived at the stream where the Fire God Temple had appeared that day. Without waiting for my reminder, Yang Shilong stopped walking and said, "The aura of the true dragon vein is here." Fang Xing and Lu Jing had obviously noticed this as well. They nodded at the same time, but their expressions were a little solemn. Fang Xing asked, "Old Lu, do you feel anything strange?" Lu Jing was a man of few words. However, at that moment, he said, "The aura of the true dragon vein is right before us. According to my senses, The aura of the true dragon vein is so thick that it feels like it is right before us. However, I cannot see it with my eyes. Fang Xing also nodded and speculated with some hesitation. Could it be that some mighty figure discovered the true dragon vein before us and used some sort of concealment technique to hide the true dragon vein from us? Lu Jing did not speak again. Yang Shilong continued, that is also a possibility. However, sometimes the supernatural workmanship of nature is more mysterious than the Tao techniques of the Heavenly Master. We should first search for it before coming to a conclusion. With that said, a very small sword-shaped object suddenly appeared in Yang Shilong's hand. It was only the length of a finger, and it looked like it was made of a few small copper coins welded together. It was very exquisite. However, from its appearance, I could not sense any Dao Qi fluctuations. However, for Yang Shilong to take it out at this time, it was definitely not an ordinary item. At the very least, it was an artifact. Just as I was secretly guessing, Yang Shilong suddenly chanted a long and complicated incantation. After he finished chanting, the pocket-sized copper coin sword seemed to be filled with air. It grew with the wind, and in an instant, it actually became a long sword that was about a meter long. Furthermore, the 9 copper coins on the body of the sword emitted strong Dao Qi fluctuations. I have seen many artifacts, and I even have 1.5 with me. One is the compass that the snake spirit was in, and the other is the double champion seal that the Metaphysics Association had rewarded me with after the dragon seizing war. Logically speaking, the compass had the snake spirit that had almost turned into a flood dragon when it was alive, and the double champion seal could release an attack that was almost equivalent to the power of a heavenly master. However, the Dao Qi fluctuations on these two items added together were not even a tenth of the Dao Qi fluctuations on the copper coin sword in Yang Shilong's hand. Not only was I shocked, but Lu Jing and Fang Xing's eyes were also filled with surprise. Fang Xing even asked, Senior Yang, you can already nurture your sword to the finest detail? Yang Shilong shook his head and said, it can't be considered as the finest detail. I can barely be considered as a dabbler. Although he said that, I could see from the intense envy in Fang Xing's eyes that Yang Shilong's move was not ordinary. After taking out the copper coin sword, Yang Shilong held the long sword in his hand and waved it horizontally and vertically in the air in front of him. Following his movements, 2 horizontal and 2 vertical marks appeared in the air. In total, there were 4 marks formed by Dao Qi, forming the character Jing in the air. This was simply subverting everything I knew. Back when I had been stuck in the Earth Master realm, Deng Meng had told me that Qi was illusory and didn't exist. One had to rely on the combination of Dao Qi and Yin and Yang Qi to activate power. It was because of his words that I had broken through the final barrier and entered the Earth Master realm. But now, the illusory Dao Qi that Deng Meng had said didn't exist had been drawn out by Yang Shilong using the copper coin sword. Not only that, but he had also made the 4 marks of Dao Qi visible to the naked eye. What kind of power was this? I subconsciously thought that this was the power of a heavenly master. However, Yang Shilong had told me that he was still only an Earth Master. The power of an Earth Master had already subverted my understanding of Dao Qi. What kind of power was a heavenly master? While I was still in shock, the 4 marks of Dao Qi suddenly spread out from Yang Shilong's body. As it spread, it became bigger and bigger. In the end, it seemed to encompass the entire world. At this time, I roughly understood the purpose of Yang Shilong's drawing. He must have used pure Dao Qi to detect if there were any fluctuations of power in the void in front of us. From there, he could determine if there was something hiding the true dragon vein that they had already sensed. I had to admit that Yang Shilong's idea was completely correct. At that time, after the fatty had divined the secrets of heaven and Zhao Yongquan had sacrificed his life, the fire god temple had slowly appeared in this void. This also proved that the fire god temple was in the void in front of us. However, the strange thing was that young Sherlong's drawing seemed to have enveloped the entire world. However, he still didn't discover any abnormalities in the void. Apart from a slight pause in the middle, it continued to float far away without any obstruction and finally disappeared in the void. Yang Sherlong withdrew the copper coin sword in his hand and frowned. He said hesitantly, "This void seems to be a little strange, but the Jingqi couldn't be detected. Could it be that it was really a mysterious formation set up by some almighty person?" The three of them discussed for a long time, but in the end, they didn't get a definite answer. At this time, it was already late. Yang Sherlong told us to set up camp and wait until tomorrow to decide. At night, it was still Fang Xing and Lu Jing who were on night duty. Although I was lying in the tent, I couldn't fall asleep. I kept making decisions in my heart. Should I tell them the secret of the Fire God Temple? Just as I was hesitating, someone suddenly knocked on the outside of my tent in the middle of the night. I thought it was Fang Xing or Lu Jing who was on night duty looking for me, so I opened the zipper of the single-person tent. In the end, the person who appeared in front of me was the mysterious person from a few days ago. Before I could say anything, he pointed at the forest not far away from me. Then, he quietly retreated and disappeared into the darkness. I understood what he meant. He wanted me to go to the small forest to talk. Although I was suspicious of this person's identity and knew that I might encounter danger if I rashly approached him, I couldn't help but be curious. I hesitated for a while before leaving the tent. Using the excuse of going to the toilet, I quietly followed him into the forest. Just as I walked in, I saw the person standing not far away from me with his back facing me. I hesitated for a while, then asked, "Uncle Lin? Is that you?" After staying silent for a while, the person answered with a muffled voice, "It's me." His voice was low and stiff, exactly the same as the fatty's dad in my memory. I was pretty sure that the person in front of me was the fatty's dad. I asked anxiously, "Uncle Lin, I remember that you already." Without waiting for me to finish, the fatty's dad suddenly turned his head, extended his hand and interrupted me, then said to me, "Let's not talk about my matter for now. I came to you today to tell you that I already know about Hu Zi's matter. You don't need to get involved in this matter. I will bring him back. Also, someone asked me to bring you something. I want to hand it to you personally." I was stunned for a while before I reacted. He really did know about the fatty's matter. But how did he know about the Fire God Temple? And how did he have the confidence to bring the fatty back? Although I was suspicious, I didn't ask further. Since he was the fatty's dad, he was far more concerned about the fatty's safety than me. Since he said that, then he must have some confidence. What made me even more suspicious was the last part of his sentence. Someone asked him to bring me something? Who would have to go through his hands to give me something? Before I could figure out what was going on, the fatty's father had already thrown a black thing to me. Then, he turned around and left without hesitation. I didn't care about the fatty's dad for now, and lowered my head to look at the thing in my hand. Under the dim light of the night, I took a closer look at what I thought was a black mass. It wasn't black at all. It was a red, cloth-like object. When I opened it, I realized that it was a red handkerchief with 2 lines of small words embroidered on it. The night was dark, so I couldn't see the words clearly. But looking at the red handkerchief, the figure with the same color appeared in my head. Chapter 97. It had been a few years since we parted that year, and I hadn't heard from Red Shadow at all. Even my memories of her were blurry. Only when I saw Yu Huan would I remember her from back then, as well as her words, "Take care, husband." I thought that everything that happened back then would just be a dream, but I didn't expect Red Shadow to suddenly send me news. I held the red handkerchief in my hand. I was so excited that I was shivering. I stood there and took a few deep breaths to calm myself down. Then, I carefully turned on the flashlight and shone it on the handkerchief. There was a line of beautiful words embroidered on it, and it shone in my eyes under the light of the flashlight. The black dragon and Qilin knot, parting gracefully. The bright star suddenly reappears, and when we meet again, we will hold hands. The words on the handkerchief were out of my expectations, and it was hard to understand. I couldn't tell what it meant at the moment. Since I had been out for quite some time, I was worried that Fang Xing and the rest, who were on night duty, would notice something amiss and come looking for me. I didn't have time to study the words, and quickly put the handkerchief away and returned to my tent. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I held the handkerchief in my hand, and continuously pondered over the meaning of the 4 sentences. I couldn't understand the first 2 sentences, and the third seemed to be related to the bright star. What made me the most excited was the 4th sentence, because there were 2 words in it, meet again. I could vaguely understand the meaning of the last 2 sentences. It seemed that Red Shadow had agreed on a day when the bright star would suddenly reappear, and then we would meet again. Red Shadow had said that we would meet again if we were fated. Could this, the bright star suddenly reappear, be the fate that she had mentioned? But what did the bright star suddenly reappear mean? Bright star, bright star. Could it be that when I reached the glory of knowledge realm, I would be able to meet her again? Thinking about it that way, I felt that it was highly possible. Back then, Red Shadow had given me the death scripture, and allowed me to walk the path of a feng shui master. Now that she had used the realm of feng shui to make a promise with me, it seemed easy to understand. The glory of knowledge realm is the last stage of a geomaster. Back then, Zhao Yongquan had just entered the glory of knowledge realm. After that, the Shenzhen Metaphysics Association's president Su, as well as Yang Shilong and the others who came with me this time, were all theoretically at this stage. Among these people, Zhao Yongquan's strength was the weakest while Yang Shilong should be the strongest. Moreover, from my observations, the difference in strength between the 2 of them was quite large. It seemed that there was still a long way to go between the beginner level and the great mastery level. However, this had nothing to do with the Red Shadow's promise. If the Red Shadow really meant this, then as long as I could enter the glory of knowledge stage, I should have met the requirements. I didn't sleep the entire night. The next morning, I was still wide awake and excited. After they woke up, Yang Shilong and the other 2 had already gathered together to discuss something. Looking at their attitudes, they would not rest until they found the hidden true dragon vein. However, just as I had expected, the 3 of them worked hard for an entire day, but in the end they still couldn't find anything. They could only helplessly look at the empty space in front of them. That night, Yang Shilong called me over again and asked me to tell him the details of the last time I saw the true dragon vein. Originally, I had only come here to find the fatty. If he had asked me yesterday, I might have hesitated on whether or not I should tell him about the Fire God Temple. However, the previous night, the fatty's father had already told me not to care about this matter, so I naturally wouldn't say anything more. I only told them that the last time I came here, there was a mountain range and the true dragon vein was on top of it. However, the true dragon vein had disappeared a day later. Seeing that he couldn't get any useful information from me, Yang Shilong could only helplessly ask me to return while they continued to think of a solution. In the next few days, Yang Shilong looked as though he was going to stay here and didn't have any intention of leaving. He sat by the stream every day and stared at the empty space in front of him. Sometimes he wouldn't even eat and would just sit there for an entire day. Yang Shilong and the others still didn't move even after we ran out of supplies. I couldn't sit still anymore and proactively went to ask the 3 of them. After persuading them for a long time, Yang Shilong finally agreed to stay here for another day. If we still couldn't find any valuable clues, we would retreat first. I finally heaved a sigh of relief and went to pack my luggage, preparing to leave. However, in the early morning of the second day, while I was sleeping, there was a sudden earth-shaking explosion that woke me up from my dream. I hurried out of the tent to take a look, and I was dumbstruck. Not far from our tents, there was a huge flame burning in the air. It lit up the originally dark night sky as if it was daytime. Not far from the flame stood a person. I took a closer look and saw that it was the fatty's father, Lin Ah-ching. That day, he had hurriedly left after saying a few words to me. In the next few days, I didn't receive any news from him. I thought that he had already left. I didn't expect that he would suddenly appear again today. Moreover, he had appeared in front of all of us in such a high-profile manner. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two also walked over. They lifted their heads to look at Lin Ah-ching. However, Lin Ah-ching didn't look at us. His eyes were focused on the burning flame in the air. Looking at him, Yang Shilong and the other two didn't take action. They also stayed there, waiting to see what he would do next. Not long after, a black dot suddenly appeared in the middle of the burning fireball. Then, the black dot gradually expanded. In the end, it became a hole made of flames. Under the illumination of the surrounding flames, it looked very deep. The hole was really big and it was facing me. However, no matter how hard I rubbed my eyes, I couldn't see what was inside. At this moment, the fatty's father turned to look at us. Then, he didn't hesitate to lift his leg and jump. He wanted to enter the deep hole. Yang Shilong, who hadn't said a word, suddenly shouted, "There's the aura of the true dragon's vein inside the hole. Let's follow him." Then, he didn't care about the others and dashed toward the hole. He was an old man, but his speed was surprisingly fast. Fang Xing and Lu Jing hesitated for a moment, but they immediately followed him. The three of them were very fast. In the blink of an eye, they were close to the hole. At this moment, the fatty's father wasn't in a hurry. After he jumped into the hole, he didn't walk in directly. Instead, he turned around and stood there calmly. His cold eyes gazed at Yang Shilong and the other two, who were rapidly approaching. Finally, Yang Shilong was the first to reach the bottom of the hole. He didn't stop and lifted his leg to jump into the hole. At this moment, Lin Ah-ching finally made a move. A black object suddenly appeared in his hand. It looked like a rock. Just like that, Lin Ah-ching raised a stone-like object and threw it at Yang Shilong in a comical manner. Yang Shilong seemed to be prepared. I didn't see him move, but the copper coin sword that I saw a few days ago appeared in his hand. Then, he threw it with both hands and the copper coin sword flew into the air. Then, it slashed down at Lin Ah-ching's head. When the copper coin sword slashed down, the stone in Lin Ah-ching's hand also flew into the air and hit the copper coin sword, creating a loud explosion. Following that, the momentum of the stone continued to fly towards Yang Shilong, and the copper coin sword that could change its size at will was smashed down from the air. When it landed on the ground, the copper coins on the sword seemed to have been smashed into pieces. Seeing that Yang Shilong was about to be hit by Lin Ah-ching's black stone, Fang Xing and Lu Jing, who had arrived from behind, quickly took out their personal magic tools and barely managed to block the attack. Even so, the three of them still suffered heavy injuries and staggered back a few steps. Seeing this scene, I was shocked. A few days ago, when Fang Xing said that the fatty's father's strength wasn't inferior to his, I was very surprised. But now, it seemed that Lin Ah-ching had defeated Yang Shilong and the other two in one move. His strength was much stronger than I had imagined. Chapter 98. After being defeated in one move, Yang Shilong and the other two stood at the bottom of the flame hole and looked at Lin Ah-ching in bewilderment, not daring to act rashly. After Lin Ah-ching kept the black stone-like object, he didn't make another move. He just stood at the hole and looked coldly at Yang Shilong and the rest. Only when the flames around the hole became fainter did Lin Ah-ching look at me from afar, then he turned around expressionlessly and walked into the hole. As though he had calculated it, the moment his figure disappeared, the flames outside the hole also quickly extinguished. When the last wisp of flame disappeared, all that was left in front of us was darkness. The hole from before didn't seem to have appeared at all. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two finally recovered. Fang Xing seemed to be unwilling to give up as he took 2 steps forward and threw the folding fan in his hand towards where the flame hole was. The folding fan spun a few rounds in the air, but didn't find anything abnormal. The flame hole had completely disappeared. Fang Xing then retreated with a face full of resentment as he muttered to Yang Shilong, "Yang Ji, what realm is this person at? Why is he so powerful?" Hearing his question, I was curious as well, so I immediately pricked up my ears and prepared to listen to Yang Shilong's answer. Although he was defeated by Lin Aching in 1 move, Yang Shilong was still the strongest among us, so he definitely understood Lin Aching's strength better. But who knew that Yang Shilong would frown and think for a long time before saying, "His strength is hard to say. From what I feel, his strength should be at the initial stage of glory of consciousness." What? Initial stage of glory of consciousness? Isn't that about the same as Zhao Yongquan back then? How is that possible? Not only was I shocked, Fang Xing and the usually expressionless Lu Jing also had faces full of astonishment. Lu Jing subconsciously said, "That's impossible. Initial stage of glory of consciousness isn't even comparable to me. How could he defeat the 3 of us in 1 move?" Yang Shilong's frown deepened as he shook his head and said, "The power contained in that weird magic tool he used wasn't strong, it was indeed only at the initial stage of glory of consciousness. But that power was very strange, it didn't seem to be Tao energy, nor was it any yin and yang power. I've never seen it before." With that, Yang Shilong took a few steps forward and picked up the copper-coin sword that had fallen to the ground. He held it in his hand and carefully examined it. After a long silence, he continued in a doubtful tone, "I've never seen this kind of power before. It's a little sinister, but it's not exactly the same. It seems to restrain the Tao Qi. The total amount of power is obviously not much, but it easily broke through my 9 coins magic sword." Not only that, after the 9-coin magic sword was damaged, I sent my Qi of the Way to the sword body, but I found that the sword body and my Qi of the Way did not seem to be compatible. His words startled me. The 9-coin magic sword was Yang Shilong's personal magical weapon. Although I hadn't created my own personal magical weapon, I knew that a geomancer had to spend many years to create it. There was no shortcut. Once it was successfully refined, the personal magic tool would be completely compatible with the Tao Qi of the Feng Shui master and become the exclusive magic tool of the Feng Shui master. No one else could take it away and use it. The reason why it had such a function was that the personal magic tool had been completely assimilated by the Tao Qi of the Feng Shui master. The Tao Qi of every Feng Shui master was different, just like how people's fingerprints were different. The personal magic tool was like a fingerprint lock added by the Feng Shui master. Except for the Feng Shui master, no one could open the lock. But now, the situation that Yang Shilong encountered was that after his personal magic weapon was broken by Lin Aching, he could not unlock it. It was unbelievable and completely overturned my previous understanding. Fang Xing and Lu Jing were also surprised. Even Yang Shilong couldn't believe it. After saying that, he lowered his head and frowned, thinking. After a while, Yang Shilong concluded, "This kind of power is too strange and overbearing. It's like the natural enemy of the Tao Qi. I've never seen it before. We must report it immediately. Besides, although we couldn't see anything wrong with the fire hole, it must be related to the true dragon vein since it appeared here. This is a big deal. We'd better leave this place and contact the headquarters first." Although we had brought communication equipment, there was a strong magnetic field near the true dragon vein. The communication equipment couldn't be used here. We could only get in touch with the outside world after we left this place. After Yang Shilong gave the order, the 3 of us didn't have any objections. We immediately went back to pack our things. When the sun rose, we set out on the road back. Yang Shilong and the others were full of confidence when they came here, but they didn't expect that it would end like this. Although they were middle-aged people who were shrewd, they couldn't help but be depressed on the way back. On the way back, Fang Xing and the others had tried to use communication equipment to contact the outside world. Unfortunately, there was no signal on their phones until they reached the Yellow Spring River. Even the satellite phone that Yang Shilong had brought with him couldn't be used. Fortunately, we had been calculating the time on the way back. When we arrived at the Yellow Spring River, it was the afternoon of October 14th. There were already corpses floating in the river. We just needed to wait until the floating corpse bridge appeared at night to cross the river. The way back had been smooth until now. As the old saying goes, blessings don't come in pairs, but misfortunes don't come alone. Right after that, something unexpected happened. The four of us rested on the riverbank for a while. When the floating corpse bridge appeared at night, we continued to cross the river. It was different from when we had come here. Today was the 15th of the month. The moon was bright, and it illuminated the floating corpses in the river. The white moonlight shone on the withered corpses' eye sockets, which looked much more terrifying than when we had come here. However, Yang Shilong and the others weren't ordinary people. They wouldn't be frightened by this kind of scene. I also had previous experience, so I wasn't really afraid. However, after the four of us had calmly stepped on the floating corpse bridge, a withered corpse suddenly stood up in the river. It rushed toward Fang Xing, who was walking in the front. Although I had told them that the dried corpses in the river could attack people, Fang Xing wasn't prepared since he hadn't encountered them on his way here, and he was in a hurry to leave. When the dried corpse attacked him, he instinctively used the folding fan magic tool he had been holding the whole time. Because he moved so fast, I didn't have time to react. The folding fan magical weapon carried abundant Tao energy and directly cut open the corpse's head. The corpse fell to the ground, but the Tao energy from the folding fan magical weapon scattered and splashed on the surrounding corpses. When a corpse breathed in Qi, it would become a shadow corpse. When it breathed in Tao energy, it would become a real zombie. Almost instantly, 4 black zombies appeared in the air and rushed toward Fang Xing, who was the closest to them. Yang Shilong reacted quickly and yelled, "Defend the enemy! Don't let the Tao energy touch the corpses!" Fang Xing also reacted at this time. He put away the folding fan magic tool in his hand and replaced it with a vermilion talisman. He stretched out his hand and fixed the nearest black zombies on the spot. Yang Shilong had also arrived. He also used the talisman that prevented Tao Qi from spilling out to restrain the other 2 black zombies. After he was done, the last black zombie was also taken care of by Lu Zheng. From this, we could see the difference between Zhao Yongquan and these people. They were all in the glory of consciousness realm, but Zhao Yongquan had a hard time dealing with a black zombie. He had even used a paperweight magical weapon in the end. Now, not only Yang Shilong, but even Fang Xing and the others could easily deal with a black zombie. The sudden incident was quickly quelled, and everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Yang Shilong seemed to be dissatisfied with Fang Xing's previous performance and specially reminded him to be careful. Just as we were preparing to continue our journey, all the corpses on the river surface suddenly started to float up and down. The river water also started to sway. Yang Shilong and the others looked at the river strangely. They didn't know what was happening, but I instantly reacted. A layer of sweat appeared on my forehead. I shouted at them, "That golden head is coming out!" After shouting, I immediately ran for my life to the other side of the river. As for Yang Shilong and the others, they had already heard about how terrifying the black head was. The moment they heard me, they immediately sprinted towards the other side of the river. Although my physical fitness wasn't bad, I hadn't passed the dragon luring stage. I hadn't received the complete baptism of the dragon energy, so there was still a gap between me and Yang Shilong and the others. Not long later, Yang Shilong and the other 2 overtook me. They were almost at the other side of the river, but I was still in the middle of the river. Just at this moment, the corpses in the river suddenly flew into the air. I lowered my head and saw that a smear of gold had already appeared in the river. Chapter 99. The golden head was about to appear, and I was still 20 meters away from the riverbank. I couldn't escape. Moreover, when I saw that gold light, my chest felt like it was hit by a hammer. I felt dizzy and my body went soft. I didn't have the strength to run away, so I fell on my butt on the dried corpse. At this moment, I couldn't help but remember a joke I had heard before. It said that when you met a bear in the forest, it didn't matter if you ran faster than the bear. What mattered was that you ran faster than your companions. Now that I thought about it, it was true. Yang Shilong and the others ran faster than me. That was why they ran away while I was left behind. I closed my eyes and recalled the terrifying appearance of the golden head I had seen the last time. I didn't have any hope for what would happen next. The golden light became thicker, and the last dried corpses on the riverbank flew up, including the corpse I was sitting on. My body tilted, and I fell into the water. The river was very cold. After I fell, I felt the cold water, and my dizzy mind became clear. Even if the golden head was unimaginably terrifying, I didn't want to die. I wanted to live. The resolute conviction in my mind suddenly returned. I did my utmost to stabilize my body. I didn't care about the consequences of carelessly activating the Tao energy. I took out my magic compass and urged the spirit snake to appear to help me. At the same time, I took out the Maoshi talisman and prepared to receive the Tao energy. However, after doing all of that, I found that the snake spirit didn't respond to my call. It didn't appear, and the Tao energy around seemed to be isolated. I took out the talisman, but I couldn't receive the Tao energy. I couldn't activate the talisman. Without the support of the Tao energy, I wasn't much better than an ordinary person. In this cold river, I couldn't even keep floating. My body kept sinking. Eventually, I sank into the water. Instinctively, I opened my mouth to breathe, but I got swallowed by a mouthful of water. I almost suffocated. I tried my best to grab the water, but I couldn't grab anything. My legs tried to move, but I couldn't float. Instead, I kept sinking. I couldn't breathe. My vision turned dark and I couldn't see anything. My consciousness was about to disappear. At this moment, my feet seemed to touch the bottom of the river. I stood up straight. Didn't they say that this river was 100 meters deep? Have I sunk to the bottom of the river? Before I could react, my body was pushed upward by an irresistible force. After a while, my head popped out of the water. I couldn't help but open my mouth to take a deep breath. However, after taking a breath, he started coughing violently again and spat out mouthful after mouthful of water. After I spat a few mouthfuls of water, I found that I had returned to the surface of the river. What was going on? Did the river dry up by itself? While I was still surprised, I suddenly saw a thick golden light around me. Instinctively, I lowered my head and was dumbstruck. It wasn't that the river had dried up, but the golden head at the bottom of the river had risen from under my feet and pushed me out of the river. In other words, I'm standing on top of that golden head. I was so scared that my scalp was about to explode. The golden head was so terrifying, and I was actually standing on it. Originally, I thought that I had managed to escape from death's door. But now, it seems that I'm going to die even more miserably. My face paled and I didn't dare to move. I didn't even dare to lower my head to look at the golden head. I was so scared that I was waiting for its revenge. However, it was strange that even though I had waited for a long time, I didn't get the revenge that I had imagined. My surroundings were completely silent. When I opened my eyes, I found that my body wasn't still. I was slowly drifting toward the riverbank. Moreover, the golden head's countless hairs had parted into two halves around me, leaving only a small space for me to stand on. Why is the golden head drifting toward the riverbank? Why isn't it hurting me? Did it come out of the river to help me cross the river? It wasn't a coincidence that it pushed me out of the river. Did it purposely save me? As soon as this thought popped up in my head, I denied it immediately. Are you kidding me? I just glanced at the golden head from a distance, and I couldn't bear its pressure. How strong is it? How could it come out of the river to help me cross the river? Before I could figure it out, the golden head had brought me to the riverbank. At first, I didn't dare to move. However, after waiting for a long time and seeing that nothing dangerous had happened, I cautiously tried to stand up. After I stood up, I saw Yang Shilong and the other two standing not far from the riverbank. All of them wore a strange expression as they looked at me blankly. I slowly lifted my legs and moved my body. The golden head was still standing there. It was as quiet as a boat. At this moment, I finally calmed down. However, I didn't dare to move too much. I slowly took small steps and walked down from the golden head's head to the riverbank. When Yang Shilong and the other two saw my movements from afar, their anxious expressions relaxed a little. Instead, they became curious. The three of them discussed for a while before slowly walking toward me. When they came to me, I had already walked down from the golden head. I stood on the riverbank and turned to look at the golden head. When I had seen it before, it was either from afar or standing on its head, so I couldn't tell how big it was. But now I could clearly see that the head was as big as an excavator. However, its facial features were exactly the same as an ordinary person's. I could even see its expression in between its eyebrows. However, the strange thing was that the facial features on the head looked like that of a child. Its eyes were pure and innocent, and the corners of its mouth were slightly lifted, giving it a flattering smile. I suddenly had an unimaginable thought. Although the golden head looked terrifying, it could be just a child. Every time it came out of the river, it was just to help people cross the river. However, because of its terrifying appearance and power, people were scared shitless and didn't give it a chance to cross the river. Although I also thought that this thought was absurd, when I looked at its face from a close distance, the fear in my heart slowly disappeared. I didn't think that the head was terrifying anymore. Instead, I thought that it was cute. With that thought in mind, I subconsciously extended my hand and touched the forehead of the golden head. When it saw my action, its expression didn't change. It still wore a flattering smile, and it even moved its forehead closer to me. It looked very obedient. I heaved a sigh of relief and gently stroked his forehead. At this moment, Yang Shilong and the other two walked next to me. Fang Xing looked at my action and couldn't help but exclaim in disbelief. Creation is so magical. Such a terrifying thing has a kind heart and it even knows how to save people. It's so strange. As he said that, he imitated my action and extended his hand to touch the forehead of the golden head. However, right at this moment, the expression on the golden head's face suddenly changed. Its eyes slightly arched, and the corners of its mouth, that had been curled up, suddenly dropped. The flattering smile on its face disappeared, and one of the strands of hair that was connected to the countless corpses on its head suddenly drooped down. Together with the corpses, it whizzed toward Fang Xing. No one could react to the sudden change. When the strand of hair that was connected to the corpses was about to hit Fang Xing, his hand was still in mid-air. However, in the next second, the thick strand of hair whizzed past, and Fang Xing's body was directly divided into two parts. The upper part was thrown into the river, while the lower part was still standing upright. After a while, it fell heavily on the ground. Fang Xing's action seemed to have enraged the golden head. After killing Fang Xing, a few more strands of hair whizzed toward Yang Shilong and the other two. Their reactions were much faster than Fang Xing's. After noticing the signs, they turned around and ran. However, the speed at which the golden head's hair was swinging was much faster than theirs. In just a blink of an eye, it had reached them and reached them. Fortunately, after running for a few steps, they were far away from the golden head. Its hair didn't hit them, but the dried corpse at the top of the hair hit their shoulders and sent them flying. They lay on the ground and struggled for a long time, but they couldn't get up. The fear that had vanished from my face reappeared. In just 1 or 2 seconds, out of the 3 people that had traveled with me for a few days, 1 was dead and 2 were injured. This golden head was really scary. It wasn't as cute as I had imagined. Chapter 100. What's going on? The golden head didn't show any mercy to Fang Xing and the others, but it was trying to please me. Could it know me? Although I had seen the golden head once more than Fang Xing and the others, I had only seen it from afar. It was impossible for me to know it. There must be some other reason that I didn't know. Could it be because of the jade bracelet? I was suspicious, but Yang Shilong and Lu Jing had already climbed up from the riverbank and were peeking in my direction. I didn't dare to take out the jade bracelet to check, so I could only hide my doubts. At that moment, the golden head moved its forehead closer to me. I thought for a while and extended my hand to touch it. As expected, it didn't resist my touch at all. Instead, it narrowed its eyes and seemed to be enjoying it. I suddenly thought of something. Since the golden head was so close to me and it was so powerful, if it could follow me like Tong Tong, wouldn't I be invincible? Yang Shilong, who was at the peak of the Earth Master level, wouldn't be able to last even a second under the golden head's attack. This golden head was probably even more powerful than the Heavenly Master. With that thought, my heart thumped hard. I swallowed my saliva and asked the golden head, "Are you willing to come with me?" Since it was so powerful, it should be able to understand human language. After asking that question, I held my breath and waited for its reply. Who knew that I would be wrong this time? The golden head didn't react to my question at all. It still looked at me with an adorable expression, its huge mouth smiling foolishly at me. I couldn't help but feel discouraged. This fellow didn't seem to understand human language. Moreover, its body was so huge. It wasn't like Tong Tong's illusory body that could hide in the jade bracelet. If he were to follow me, it would be a troublesome matter. After getting rid of the unrealistic thoughts in my head, I extended my hand and rubbed the golden head's forehead. I smiled and said to it, "Xiao Jin, you should go back. I'm going to leave soon. I'll come and play with you again when I have time." After saying that, I waved at it and pretended to get up to leave. This time, the golden head seemed to understand. Its huge head retreated a little. It looked like it was going to return to the river. However, right at this moment, a shadow suddenly swung down from the top of its head. My heart chilled. Fang Xing's heaved body wasn't far from me. Was my assumption wrong? Was the golden head going to attack me again? Cold sweat instantly appeared on my forehead. I tried my best to run away, but the golden head was too fast. Before I could do anything, the shadow was already in front of me. However, it was different from what I had imagined. The shadow didn't hit me but stopped in front of me. This thick strand of hair didn't have a corpse attached to it. Instead, a green bead the size of an egg was wrapped around it. It floated quietly in front of me. I was stunned for a moment before I reacted. I asked the golden head, "Is this for me?" The golden head still didn't react, but it still didn't take back the pillar. I turned to look behind me. Yang Shilong and the others were standing behind me. Their line of sight was blocked by my body. Moreover, the golden head was emitting a golden light. The green bead wasn't obvious in the golden light. Yang Shilong and the others shouldn't be able to see it. I carefully extended my hand and tried to use my body to block the movement as I received the green bead. I received the green bead and put it in my pocket. The golden head finally turned around. Its body moved slightly and quickly returned to the center of the river. It glanced at me one last time before slowly sinking into the river. After the golden light disappeared, the flying corpses in the air also fell into the river. Some of them floated downstream, while the others sank to the bottom of the river. The river bank gradually calmed down. After a long while, Yang Shilong and Lu Jinkai returned from afar. Their faces were still filled with fear. After taking a few glances at the river bank, Yang Shilong asked me, still in a state of shock, "That thing left?" I nodded but didn't say anything. Yang Shilong gently exhaled. Then, he asked, what was that thing? Why was it so kind to you, but directly tried to kill us? I shook my head and smiled wryly. I don't know. I only saw it from afar last time. I was almost scared to death when it knocked me out of the river. I thought that I was dead for sure. Who knew that it would end up like this? Although Yang Shilong and the others found it strange, they obviously didn't think that I would be related to such a terrifying existence. In the end, they could only conclude that this terrifying golden head was temperamental and acted strangely, leaving no traces behind. After chatting for a while, Yang Shilong walked next to the lower half of Feng Xing's body. He stayed silent for a long time before sighing. He turned to the two of us and said, "The upper half of the body fell into the river and can't be found anymore. Let's bury this body first. After we go back and inform his family, we'll find someone to retrieve the body." Since Yang Shilong said so, Lu Jing and I naturally didn't have any objections. We found a place with soft soil not far from the riverbank and started to dig a hole. At this moment, Yang Shilong and Lu Jing still had bloodstains on the corners of their mouth. Yang Shilong's left arm was twisted at a strange angle. It looked like it was completely broken. Although the mysterious accumulating curse could adjust the body's condition and suppress the injuries for a short time, it wasn't a miraculous medicine. It couldn't completely heal the injured body. Since the two of them were injured, the task of digging the hole was naturally given to me. I went to find a thick tree branch. After digging for half a day, I was exhausted and could only dig a small hole. I had heard that when a geomancy master reached the glorious knowledge realm, they could recognize the power of the 5 elements and create talismans of the 5 elements. Among them, the earth talismans could easily change the soil, so digging a hole was a piece of cake. Unfortunately, I hadn't reached that level yet. In the end, I could only take out 2 fierce yang talismans and use my Tao energy to guide them. A large amount of violent yang energy exploded on the ground, creating a 1-meter-wide pit. Only then did I bury Feng Xing's corpse. After filling the hole, Yang Shilong went to find a few stones and placed the 6 divine lines on them as a sign. After everything was done, Yang Shilong didn't want to linger. He called me and Lu Jing to continue our journey through the night. Since it was the 15th of the month, the moonlight was bright after midnight. It wasn't too difficult to travel at night. However, Yang Shilong and Lu Jing were injured, which affected their speed. After leaving the Yellow Spring River, we walked for around 7 or 8 hours. It was around noon when we finally returned to the Shenangjia scenic area. When we arrived at the scenic area, our phone signal was restored. Yang Shilong quickly reported the situation to the headquarters. He didn't seem to be in a hurry. He didn't urge us to leave. Instead, he arranged for Lu Jing and me to stay in the hotel to rest. Although I didn't encounter any danger along the way, I was exhausted. When we returned to the hotel room, I slept until nightfall. When I got up, Yang Shilong and the others didn't come to find me. I didn't go out. I sat on the bed and took out the green bead that the golden head had given me. I started to study it. This bead was as big as an egg. It was green, but it wasn't the same as the bright green jade. It was a pale green that didn't make people feel comfortable. I took the bead and gently knocked on the wall. The sound wasn't clear. It didn't look like glass or jade. It felt like plastic. It wasn't soft or hard. It was really strange. After studying it for a long time, I couldn't recognize what this bead was. I didn't know why the golden head had given me such a thing. Feeling helpless, I had to put the bead away. I would deal with it later. After putting the bead away, I took out the jade bracelet. After absorbing part of the dragon vein's energy from the jade bracelet, it had been stabilized for a few days. The dragon energy had turned into my Tao energy. Now I could absorb it for the second time. Since the Tao energy in my body was close to the gathering Qi as a pillar realm, it would be best for me to wait until I went to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters to observe the true dragon vein. Then, I would break through to the dragon summoning realm. However, after reading the words on the red handkerchief, I became more anxious to increase my power. Although I wasn't sure if the red shadow had sent me a message or if I had interpreted it correctly, it was still a thought. I closed my eyes and calmly absorbed the dragon energy from the jade bracelet as I looked forward to the bright future. In just a few minutes, I felt that the dragon energy in my body had reached an exaggerated level. It was very difficult to absorb any more. I stopped and retrieved the jade bracelet. Then, I sat cross-legged on the bed and started to stabilize the dragon energy in my body. After half a night, the Tao energy in my body was so abundant that I could reach the gathering chi as a pillar realm. At this moment, I had only digested half of the dragon energy I had absorbed. After thinking for a while, I didn't dare to break through to the dragon summoning realm. I tried my best to suppress the absorption of the dragon energy in my body. I wanted to disperse the excess dragon energy. However, the Tao energy in my body seemed to have a mind of its own. It greedily absorbed the dragon energy. Chapter 101. After reaching the realm of guiding chi like a pillar, the Tao chi in the body would surge out and cleanse the body, greatly increasing the physique of the feng shui master. At the same time, the Tao Qi would enter the meridians of the body and charge the 8 meridians, opening the acupoints, allowing the feng shui master to enter the second stage of Earth Master, pressure point realm. Since most of the Tao Qi in the feng shui master's body was formed from dragon qi, this process was also called dragon qi baptism. The process of dragon qi baptism was very important to feng shui masters because the 8 meridians were different. Opening different acupoints would bring different improvements to the feng shui master. At the same time, opening these acupoints would indicate which step the feng shui master could reach in the future, so I had to be careful. I stopped what I was doing and sat on the bed, thinking about how to proceed with dragon qi baptism. The 8 meridians were the general name for the Ren meridian, Du meridian, Chong meridian, Dai meridian, Yin heel meridian, Yang heel meridian, Yin linking meridian, and Yang linking meridian. On each meridian there were dozens of acupoints. Some feng shui masters with mediocre talent could only open 1 or 2 acupoints after going through the dragon qi baptism. Although they had reached the pressure point realm, they were much weaker than people of the same level. They might not even be that much stronger than feng shui masters of the dragon drawing realm. Wanting to go one step further and reach the glory of knowledge realm was basically wishful thinking. Normal feng shui masters could normally open half of the acupoints in one of the 8 meridians, about 5 or 6. Feng shui masters who had reached the pressure point realm were strong and could completely crush feng shui masters of the dragon seeking realm. Moreover, after hard work, they might even have a chance to reach the glory of knowledge realm. The 2 above were normal feng shui masters. Very few talented feng shui masters could open a complete meridian during the dragon qi baptism and enter the pressure point realm. This kind of feng shui master could completely crush people of the same level. After a few more years of hard work, they would quickly enter the glory of knowledge realm. There was even a small possibility of them reaching the legendary Heavenly Master realm. Because there were very few feng shui masters who opened a complete meridian, there was even a special name for them in the metaphysics world. They were called One Meridian Geomaster. Any geomaster of one vein would be highly sought after by the famous sects of the profound world. As long as they were willing to join, these sects would provide for their cultivation need. Unlike a feng shui master like me, who can only run businesses to earn money to buy all kinds of things needed for cultivation. Of course, these large sects were not doing a losing business. As long as they provided for them for a few years, these earthly masters of one vein would advance to the glorious knowledge stage. Their strength would be very strong and they would become the pillars of these sections. Some of them could even attempt to break through to the Heavenly Master realm. Once a Heavenly Master appeared, it was an absolute glory for a sect. Just like how a true dragon's vein could ensure that a sect could be passed down through the ages, a celestial master could do the same. Other than a vein of earth masters, it was said that some exceptional geniuses could even open 2 complete meridians after undergoing the baptism of the dragon chi. These absolute geniuses were known as double-vein geomasters. Their talent was limitless. As for some of the feng shui masters who had opened 3 or even 4 meridians, almost all of them were great figures in history. For example, Zhang Daoling of Longhu Mountain was said to have opened 4 meridians. There was also Qiu Chuji, the eternal spring sage, who was said to have opened 3 meridians. These existences were as rare as phoenix feathers and unicorn horns. They had almost no reference value, so I didn't dare to think too much about it. I just hoped that I could open a complete meridian and be satisfied. Although I was looking forward to knowing how many meridians I could open, I had just reached the drawing chi like a pillar realm. It was not suitable for me to undergo the baptism of the dragon chi immediately. I sat on the bed and rested for a while. Since I had nothing to do, I might as well convert the remaining dragon chi in my body into Dao Qi and absorb it. However, after absorbing it, I could not help but smile bitterly. After my Dao Qi reached the drawing Qi like a pillar realm, it was not that I could not absorb Dragon Qi anymore. It was just that the efficiency of absorbing Dragon Qi was too low. Previously, the same amount of Dragon Qi could be converted into Dao Qi at a 1-to-1 rate. However, now, the conversion rate was not even 10-to-1. Even after absorbing the remaining Dragon Qi in my body, I could not feel the increase in Dao Qi. Everyone knew that the more Dao Qi stored in one's body during the drawing Dragon Qi, the more meridians one would open during the baptism of the Dragon Qi. Normally, everyone should try their best to increase their Dao Qi reserves during the drawing Dragon Qi stage. It would be best if they could draw Qi like a sea, let alone draw Qi like a pillar. However, in reality this was not practical. Once the limit of drawing Qi like a pillar was exceeded, the conversion rate would be less than 10-to-1 if I continued to absorb Dragon Qi like I was doing now. It would take an unlimited amount of energy and time to increase the Dao Qi by a little. In this way, the loss outweighed the gain. The truly talented feng shui masters wouldn't care about this. Only those with poor talent would use this method to improve their chances of winning the Dragon Qi baptism in the future. However, such feng shui masters usually lost everything in the end and couldn't improve their chances of winning the Dragon Qi baptism. However, my current situation was different. There was still excess Dragon Qi in the jade bracelet. It would be a waste if I did not absorb it. Originally, I wanted to absorb all the Dragon Qi in the jade bracelet. However, after I absorbed the Dragon Qi in my body, the Dao Qi became unstable again. I needed a period of nourishment before I could absorb it again. Looking at the remaining Dragon Qi in the jade bracelet, I had to give up for now. At this moment, the sky was still bright. Light shone in through the gaps of the curtains, making the room seem even darker. I stretched and jumped off the bed. Although I did not sleep for the entire night, the Dao Qi in my body increased. I was at my peak. I walked over to open the curtains and let the sunlight shine on my body. I felt my body brimming with energy. The next step was to find a suitable opportunity to undergo the baptism of the Dragon Qi. Then, I would be able to officially enter the realm of Pressure Point. After that, I would work hard to enter the realm of glorious knowledge. Then, the Red Shadow would keep his promise and appear in front of me again, right? Thinking about this, I couldn't help but smile. At this moment, there was a sudden knock on the door. I was stunned. Yesterday, Yang Shilong said that he was going to rest here for 2 days. Why did he come to find me so early today? I walked over to open the door. What appeared in front of me was neither Yang Shilong nor Lu Jing. It was a tall beauty in casual clothes. I was stunned for a moment before asking, "Who are you looking for?" This woman looked to be around the same age as me. She was very beautiful, but her lips were thin and her face was expressionless. She looked very cold. Even after hearing my question, she didn't open her mouth to speak and only stared at me. I didn't understand. Even if she was a beauty, wasn't it rude of her to suddenly knock on my door and stare at me without saying a word? Just as I was about to ask again, a cough came from behind the woman. Yang Shilong suddenly walked out with a rare smile on his face. He pointed at the young beauty and said to me, "This is our Metaphysics Association's Miss Yi Piampian. She has the same position as me, a vice president. Miss Yi just rushed over from the headquarters this morning to take over my responsibility for the investigation of the true dragon vein." I was stunned. Such a young lady was actually the vice president of the Metaphysics Association like Yang Shilong? Moreover, from the way Yang Shilong spoke, it was obvious that he was trying to please this young lady. This scene made my eyes widen. However, what made my heart flutter wasn't this, but the lady's name. Yi Piampian. I couldn't help but recall the line of words on the red handkerchief. Black Dragon Chilan Not, Piampian, farewell. I didn't understand the two lines at all. Could it be related to the name of this lady in front of me? Chapter 102. I nodded absent-mindedly and lifted my head to look at Yi Piampian. I tried to find any connection between her and the red shadow or me. However, after looking at her for a long time, I couldn't find anything except that I had never seen her before. To an unfamiliar girl, my gaze was rather abrupt. However, Yi Piampian didn't seem to mind at all. Her expression didn't even change. She continued to ask in an icy voice, "Tell me about how you discovered the true dragon's vein. Don't leave out any details." I was stunned and didn't reply to her. I turned to look at Yang Shilong. I had already told Yang Shilong about the true dragon vein. Moreover, he must have reported it to the Metaphysics Association's headquarters. Since this woman was sent here, she must know about it. Why did she want me to repeat it? It was obvious that she didn't trust Yang Shilong. It was normal for her to not trust others, but she didn't give face to Yang Shilong, who was also the vice president of the Metaphysics Association. I thought that Yang Shilong would be angry, or at least unhappy. However, when I turned to look at him, Yang Shilong smiled wryly and gestured for me to repeat the story to Yi Piampian. I smiled and opened the door for them to sit down. Then, I repeated what I had told Yang Shilong to Yi Piampian. After I finished, Yi Piampian frowned and didn't say anything. She seemed to be thinking about something. The experience that I told her was naturally made up, but I wasn't just making it up. It was probably something that I personally experienced last time, but I hid the last part. I only mentioned the true dragon vein and didn't mention the fire god temple. Seeing that she didn't say anything, I stood up and made 2 cups of tea from the hotel. When I returned, Yi Piampian lifted her head to look me in the eyes. "According to what you said, the mountain range where the true dragon vein is located is really huge. You were there at that time. Didn't you notice that such a huge mountain range disappeared?" Yes. I had already prepared myself to answer her question. I nodded and placed the cup in front of her. "You didn't notice any signs beforehand?" Yi Piampian continued to ask. I shook my head again. "No." Yi Piampian suddenly frowned and said, "You're lying. It was such a huge mountain range, and it was a true dragon vein. Even a heavenly master would not be able to easily make it disappear into thin air. At the very least, a concealment formation would have to be set up beforehand. I can understand if you say that you didn't notice it at the time, but if you say that you didn't notice any signs beforehand, that's impossible." I already knew that she wouldn't say anything nice when she asked me to repeat myself, but I didn't mind. I spread my hands and said, "I'm not sure if Heavenly Master can do it, but I really didn't discover anything at that time." Vice President Yang and the others are stronger than me, and they've also gone to the site to take a look. You can ask them if they discovered anything." After I said that, Yang Shilong replied awkwardly, "I could only feel that the true dragon's vein was right in front of me. However, I couldn't find any signs of it being hidden." Yi Pianpian was unmoved. She shook her head and said, "It's normal that it's hard to find out now, because the concealing formation has been activated. But before the concealing formation was activated, there must have been something wrong. You didn't tell me." This time, I was a little angry. How could such a beautiful girl be so obstinate and self-opinionated? She didn't even discuss with me and immediately accused me of lying. My expression also turned cold. I said to Yi Pianpian, "The reason why I told you about the true dragon's vein was because I wanted to make a contribution to the Metaphysics Association. Does Miss Yi think that it's my duty? If I knew that Miss Yi would interrogate me like this, I wouldn't have told you about it." Seeing that I was angry, Yang Shilong smiled and tried to smooth things over. "Miss Yi is too concerned. Xiao Zhou, don't take it to heart. Miss Yi, don't be too anxious. Let's think of another way." I had to give face to Yang Shilong. Just as I was about to get out of this situation, who knew that Yi Pianpian would shake her head expressionlessly. "I'm not concerned. He definitely didn't tell the truth." I was so angry that I was amused. I simply told her, "That's all I know. Miss Yi, it's up to you whether you believe me or not. Anyway, I have nothing else to say." Yang Shilong smiled helplessly and awkwardly on the side. Yi Pianpian was still indifferent. She stood up from the chair and raised her feet as if she was about to leave. However, after taking 2 steps, she turned to look at me and said, "I'll go to the site to check it out. If I find that you're lying, I'll come to find you again." With that, she walked out of the room without hesitation. I curled my lips and didn't want to talk to her anymore. However, when I recalled the horrors of the underworld river and the Valley of Ghosts, I couldn't help but remind her, "If you want to go, you'd better ask Uncle Yang to accompany you. It won't be an easy journey." Hearing that, Yi Pianpian stopped and turned to look at me strangely. "Then," she said seriously, "I'll be responsible for my own safety." Then, she didn't bother with me anymore and left on her own. I was so angry that I almost slapped my mouth. That woman was so arrogant that her eyes were staring at the sky. Why did I say that? After Yi Pianpian left, Yang Shilong awkwardly explained to me that Yi Pianpian was a straightforward person and that her words would offend people easily. He asked me not to mind her and said that she was a good girl. Except for her beauty, I didn't find anything good about her. Of course, I didn't tell Yang Shilong about it. I just said a few words to him and sent him out of the room. I had been to Shenangjia twice, but I hadn't seen the scenery in the scenic area since I was in a hurry. I finally had time this time. After breakfast in the morning, I wandered around. After walking around and spending a lot of money on admission tickets, I didn't see much good scenery. I didn't know if it was an occupational disease of a feng shui master, but when I looked at the scenery, I first looked at the spiritual energy in feng shui. It wasn't that the scenery here wasn't beautiful, but the spiritual energy in the artificially developed scenery was very weak. It couldn't be compared to the Xiapuan Gorge on the other side of the Yellow Spring River. When I returned to the hotel in the afternoon, Yang Shilong came to see me again. I then learned that Yi Pianpian had left for the Fire God Temple at noon. Since this woman could become the vice guild leader, there was no need to doubt her strength. However, it was too arrogant of her to travel alone. Who knew what would happen in the Yellow Spring River or the Ghost Valley? It would be a pity if such a beautiful woman died there. After telling me about Yi Pianpian, Yang Shilong said that he was going to return to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters that night. He also asked me to return to Shenzhen as soon as possible. Last time, President Su told me that after the dragon seizing competitions list was confirmed, we would gather and head to the Metaphysics Society's headquarters in about a month. It should be around 1 or 2 weeks. After Yang Shilong and the others left in the evening, I went to the train station to buy a ticket and rushed back to Shenzhen. It was already the next morning when I returned to Shenzhen. I carried my luggage and returned to the hotel that Wang Yongjun had booked for me. Before I reached my room, I bumped into Dai Nanzhou. As soon as he saw me, he ran over and punched me. He said with hidden bitterness, "You're finally back. I've been looking for you several times." I was surprised. "Why are you looking for me? It's not like you don't know my phone number. Can't you just call me if you need anything? If I could get through to you, I wouldn't have to run back and forth. I've been trying to call you since the day before yesterday, but I couldn't get through." Now that he mentioned it, I remembered that when I returned from the Fire God Temple, I fell into the Yellow Spring River. My phone couldn't be used after it was soaked in the water, but I didn't care about it. I awkwardly changed the topic. "What happened?" Dai Nanzhou hurriedly told me that something had happened to his girlfriend at school and he wanted me to help her. "Girlfriend? School?" After I asked him for a while, he told me that he had a new girlfriend this year. Her name was Zhou Shi, and she was a third-year student at a local school in Shenzhen. His girlfriend, Zhou Shi, had a close friend called Lin Yuetong. The two of them lived in the same dormitory. In the early hours of the day before yesterday, Zhou Shi was sleeping in the dormitory when she was suddenly woken up. She heard Lin Yuetong barking from the lower berth. Chapter 103. Barking like a dog? As soon as Dai Nanzhou said that, I furrowed my brows. If a person barked like a dog, they either had a mental problem or were possessed by a dog. There were often legends about cats and dogs possessing a person, but in reality, it was almost impossible for such a thing to happen. Animals were different from humans. Humans had 3 souls, and after they died, they would form a yin soul. Animals only had 2 souls, and ordinary animals couldn't form a yin soul. Only the snake spirit, which had cultivated successfully when it was alive, could create a natal soul. After it died, its consciousness wouldn't scatter and it would form a spirit. Moreover, the cultivation of animals required the accumulation of countless years. Species with short lifespans like cats and dogs had almost no possibility of cultivating a natal soul. Only long-lived species like snakes and turtles had a higher possibility of cultivating a natal soul. In addition, some creatures like foxes and yellow-skinned animals that were born with a trace of natal soul qi also had a higher probability of cultivating a natal soul. After pondering for a while, I shook my head at Dai Nanzhou. Don't think of everything in a strange way. Barking like a dog is most likely a mental problem. Just send him to the hospital for treatment. Why did you come to see me? Ever since he was in university, he had always been a noisy person. Moreover, he was very interested in metaphysics. He liked to ask about strange things and make wild guesses. After listening to me, Dai Nanzhou became anxious. He said, "No, it's not that simple. My girlfriend is outside the hotel. Put down your luggage and we'll go there. I'll ask Zhou Shi to tell you." Although I didn't think much of it, I still went to put down my luggage and followed Dai Nanzhou to the hotel's underground parking lot. His girlfriend was in his car. When I saw Zhou Shi in the car, my eyes brightened. This girl was more than 7 meters tall. She was fair and slender, and her facial features were exquisite. She looked like a celebrity. Dai Nanzhou was lucky to have found such a beautiful girlfriend. After Dai Nanzhou introduced us to each other with a smile, Zhou Shi generously reached out his hand from the front seat and shook my hand. Then, he said to me with a face full of curiosity, "Nanzhou always talks about how his buddy Zhou Yi was like in university. I've been rubbing it so much that calluses are about to form in my ears. I've always wanted him to introduce me to him, but who knew that after such a long time, there wouldn't be a suitable opportunity. We only met today." I smiled and chatted with her. I wanted to ask her about Lin Yuetong, but Zhou Shi didn't seem to be in a hurry. He asked me, I heard from Nanzhou that you had a female classmate in your university. She saw a little girl's soul in the toilet of the dormitory. She told me that it was really scary. She also said that you were the one who solved it. Is that true? I was stunned and turned to look at Dai Nanzhou, who was sitting in the driver's seat. I was a little unhappy. Why didn't this guy watch his mouth? Why did he say everything to others? Dai Nanzhou seemed to notice that I wasn't happy. He explained awkwardly, "Zhou, she likes ghost stories. I used to tell her ghost stories to trick her." After the two flirted for a while, Zhou Shi asked me about Suzu. I didn't want to talk about it, so I casually answered her. Fortunately, I didn't hear Suzu's name from what she said. Dai Nanzhou probably didn't tell her. This guy still had some sense and wasn't blinded by love. Fortunately, I didn't hear Suzu's name from her words. It was likely that Dai Nanzhou didn't tell him. That fellow was still rational and hadn't been blinded by love. Suzu has become a famous celebrity ever since she participated in a talent show in university. I occasionally hear about her on the news. As a public figure, if what happened back then were to be exposed, it would definitely affect Suzu's future. That's why I was unhappy just now. After getting out of the car, I found out that Zhou Shi's university was an art university. No wonder she looked like a celebrity and behaved naturally. It turned out that she was studying at a celebrity preparatory school. It was no wonder why she looked like a celebrity and behaved naturally. It turned out she was studying at a celebrity preparatory school. I turned to look at Zhou Shi's face. I didn't know much about physiognomy, but I could tell at a glance that Zhou Shi's Fulu Palace wasn't a good place. Even if she had some achievements in her career, she wouldn't be able to achieve much. In other words, she couldn't become a superstar. Anyway, it was good. Dai Nanzhou seemed to be obsessed with her. If she couldn't become a superstar, the two of them could continue their relationship. If she became a superstar, Dai Nanzhou would have a tragic ending. On the way to the university, Zhou Shi's face turned gloomy. He told me about Lin Yuedong's situation. It was just as Dai Nanzhou had said. Lin Yuedong suddenly started barking like a dog in the middle of the night. She looked sluggish and didn't recognize anyone. Zhou Shi knew that something was wrong. He hurriedly called Lin Yuedong's mother. After anxiously explaining the situation, Lin Yuedong's mother was very calm. It was as if she had already known about this. She directly told Zhou Shi not to contact the hospital. Then, she asked him to pass the phone to Lin Yuedong. Zhou Shi didn't understand, so he put the phone in Lin Yuedong's ear. However, Lin Yuedong was very resistant. She struggled and barked like a dog while using her hand to call the other side of the phone. Zhou Shi talked to Lin Yuedong's mother. Lin Yuedong's mother told him not to worry about Lin Yuedong and to force her to listen to the phone. Then, the girls in Zhou Shi's dormitory grabbed Lin Yuedong's arms and legs and tied her up. Then, Zhou Shi put the phone in Lin Yuedong's ear. No one knew what Lin Yuedong's mother said on the phone, but after a few minutes, Lin Yuedong finally stopped barking like a dog. Instead, she began to wail loudly, but there were no tears on her face. She just kept letting out hysterical and uncontrollable cries. This time, Zhou Shi didn't know what to do. He braced himself and continued to put the phone in Lin Yuedong's ear. This situation lasted for more than 20 minutes. Lin Yuedong finally stopped. She stopped barking and quietly curled up on the bed. Her body twitched from time to time. Zhou Shi heaved a sigh of relief. He took the phone back and listened to it. Lin Yuedong's mother's voice was very strange. She kept chanting something that sounded like Buddhist scriptures. After Zhou Shi said that Lin Yuedong's condition had temporarily stabilized, Lin Yuedong's mother asked her to take care of her. Then, she said that she would think of a solution and hung up. After that, Lin Yuedong lay on the bed and gradually fainted. There was no news from Lin Yuedong's mother. When the sun rose, Zhou Shi called Lin Yuedong's mother again. However, no one answered. The girls in the dormitory discussed for a while. They wanted to send Lin Yuetong to the hospital first. However, Zhou Shi remembered what Lin Yuetong's mother said and insisted on not sending her to the hospital. Then, he contacted Dai Nanzhou. In the next 2 days, Lin Yuetong was in a coma. He couldn't get through to her home phone. Dai Nanzhou's team couldn't find me either. Both of them were in a terrible situation. After listening to Zhou Shi's explanation, I became serious. It seemed things weren't as simple as I had thought. Although Buddhists weren't the same as geomancy masters, they were still orthodox. Buddhist scriptures had a strong power to expel evil spirits. According to Zhou Shi, Lin Yuetong's mother's chanting of Buddhist scriptures could calm her down. It proved that Lin Yuetong's strange behavior wasn't as simple as a mental problem. As for the specific situation, I couldn't tell until I saw her in person. I needed to observe her face to be sure. I didn't ask further and followed Zhou Shi to her dormitory. I thought that it wouldn't be easy to enter the female dormitory. However, Zhou Shi's school seemed to have a loose management system. Dai Nanzhou and I followed her. No one came out to manage the dormitory. When we arrived at the dormitory, I observed the place before entering. There was no yin energy in the room. It looked normal. I saw Lin Yuetong. It was just as Zhou Shi had said. She was lying on the bed, still unconscious. Her breathing was weak, and her body would convulse every half a minute. I observed Lin Yuetong for quite a long time. Except for her weak soul, everything else was normal. I didn't see anything strange. While I was puzzled, I saw a tiny red dot between Lin Yuetong's eyebrows. If I didn't look carefully, I wouldn't have noticed it. It looked like a small needle had poked her. Chapter 104. Little Red Dot? Zhou Shi asked in confusion. He followed the direction my finger pointed and looked carefully for a few seconds before he found the very inconspicuous little red dot. I don't think so, Zhou Shi said uncertainly. This red dot is too inconspicuous. No one would stare at people normally. I nodded, but I was even more confused. The space between the eyebrows was where the soul resided. Inserting needles here would greatly affect the soul. Some unorthodox metaphysical sects would insert needles in the space between the eyebrows when using sorcery on people to split and scatter the soul. Did Lin Yuetong offend someone from the metaphysics world? But she was just a university student. How did she get involved with people from the metaphysics world? Also, I couldn't explain the behavior of barking like a dog. There were many ways to harm people in the metaphysics world, but I've never heard of such a situation. This matter was very troublesome. If Lin Yuetong was still conscious, or could contact her family, then we should be able to get some valuable clues and slowly solve the mystery. But now, there were no clues, and I had no idea where to start. After thinking about it, I decided to try using a special talisman recorded in death scripture. This talisman was called Soul-Seeking Talisman. Its actual use was similar to the Soul-Searching Seal I saw Zhao Yongquan use before, but the Soul-Searching Seal was more domineering. It forcefully searched for information from the soul, while the Soul-Seeking Talisman allowed the unconscious soul to temporarily possess human thoughts, and then communicate with people. In terms of effect, the Soul-Searching Seal was much better than the Soul-Seeking Talisman. If I wanted to know something, I just had to search the soul. It was simple and effective. Unfortunately, the hand seal could only be used after reaching the pressure point realm. I couldn't use it at all right now, so I could only use the soul-seeking talisman instead. But then again, the soul-seeking talisman also had benefits that the soul-searching seal didn't have. The soul-searching seal could only be used on weaker souls. For example, a feng shui master in the pressure point realm couldn't use the soul-searching seal against a feng shui master in the glory of consciousness realm, because if he used it, he would definitely be devoured. However, the soul-seeking talisman didn't have this problem. Even if it was the soul of a heavenly master, I could use the soul-seeking talisman to communicate, but whether or not the soul was willing to talk to me was not something I could control. The soul-seeking talisman is a very unorthodox talisman, and I have never made one before. Now that I need to use it, I can only make one at the last minute. I asked Dai Nanzhou to contact his uncle, Wang Yongjun, asking him to send me the wolf hair brush, cinnabar, and yellow talisman paper I needed to make talismans. Ever since I helped Wang Yongjun deal with the Miao girl Zhao Ying's matter and agreed to work in his company, Wang Yongjun's attitude towards me had been very good. The hotel directly booked a 1-year stay for me and even paid me half a year's salary in advance. If there was anything, I just had to call him and he would definitely be more attentive than me. Less than half an hour after Dai Nanzhou made the call, the sound of a speeding car came from downstairs. I went to the balcony and saw a black Mercedes-Benz MPV parked under the dormitory. Wang Yongjun and the driver that picked me up a few times last time got out of the car together. Dai Nanzhou hurriedly ran downstairs and brought Wang Yongjun and the other man back to the dormitory. I was flattered to see Wang Yongjun. He had a dozen or so electronics factories under him with tens of thousands of workers. He was very busy every day, but he actually personally came to deliver something to me. I quickly walked over to take the paper bag from his hands and said, "Boss Wang, you could have just sent someone over. Why did you personally come?" Wang Yongjun laughed heartily. I had nothing better to do. At the last exchange meeting, I sat in the guest seats and personally saw Master Zhou take 2 first places. I was extremely happy at the time. I knew that Master Zhou's cultivation realm wasn't shallow, but I didn't think that Master Zhou would be able to suppress a province and take first place. Afterwards, I thought about it and realized that the annual salary I gave you before was too low. After today's matter, I'll have Xiao Zhao bring you another contract. I'll raise your annual salary to 5 million. His words made me feel embarrassed. Before, he still called me younger brother Zhou, but now that I was in the limelight at the exchange meeting, he directly called me Master Zhou. I wryly smiled and said, "I'm Nanzhou's classmate and you're my elder. I can't accept being called that. Just call me younger brother like before." After much persuasion, Wang Yongjun finally changed the way he addressed me. Afterwards, he sighed with emotion and praised me. It seems that younger brother Zhou is not only skilled, but also modest. There aren't many youngsters with your temperament. During this small talk, I originally wanted to decline the matter of the annual salary increase, but now that I didn't have the chance to say it, I simply didn't say anything. With Wang Yongjun's net worth, there wasn't much difference between 2 million and 5 million. Next, I took out the tools from the paper bag and prepared to make talismans. Wang Yongjun understood the taboo of a feng shui master. He didn't need me to say anything and called Dai Nanzhou and the others to leave, leaving me alone in the dormitory. I went to the balcony outside to wash my hands before returning. I spread out the yellow talisman paper and silently chanted the Tranquil Heart incantation. When a feng shui master makes talismans, they must be sincere. Moreover, they must clean their hands, body, and heart. In this way, they can draw in Dao Qi and create talismans with miraculous effect. After busying myself for a while, a brand new soul-inquiring talisman was made. After I called Wang Yongjun and the others in, they all had a curious expression on their faces. They stared at the talisman on the table without blinking. Dai Nanzhou curiously asked me about the use of the talisman. Before I could open my mouth, Wang Yongjun helped me. "Nanzhou, don't ask. This little girl has been unconscious for 2 or 3 days. Let's first see how younger brother Zhou will save her. As for the use of the talisman, won't you see it in a moment?" After saying that, he turned his head and asked me, "Younger brother Zhou, can we save her now?" I shook my head and said, "There's no rush. I still need something else. I'll have to trouble Uncle Wang to help me find a few eggs. I don't want the eggs from the farms sold in the market. I want the free-range eggs from the countryside, the ones that have been fertilized." Many people who grew up in the city might not know that there were 2 types of eggs. One was fertilized and the other was unfertilized. In the past, a classmate of mine made a joke. On a whim, he wanted to study how to hatch chicks, so he bought a bag of eggs from the supermarket. After returning to the dormitory, he covered the bag with a blanket to hatch it in the middle of the summer. In the end, a few days later, this guy was dumbfounded. The chicks didn't hatch, and instead, the dormitory was filled with the smell of rotten eggs. When I heard about this, I almost laughed myself to death. Even if this guy gave the eggs to an old hen, he still wouldn't be able to hatch chick. The reason was simple: these eggs weren't fertilized. Many people may take it for granted that hens can only lay eggs after being fertilized, but in fact, there is no need for a rooster. Hens can lay eggs on their own, but the eggs they lay are unfertilized eggs. After mating with a rooster, the eggs that are laid are fertilized eggs that can be hatched into chick. This small matter was naturally not difficult for Wang Yongjun. Soon, he asked someone to get some free-range eggs. He also specifically asked the egg seller to contact the chicken farmers. After confirming that the eggs were laid by free-range chickens, he sent them over. After getting the eggs, I picked out a relatively round one and lightly knocked a small hole on the corner of the table. Then, I walked to the sink outside and shook off the egg white and yolk bit by bit. Afterward, I poured water in and rinsed it a few times to make sure there was nothing left inside. After doing all of this, I rolled the soul-inquiring talisman that I had just made into a thin roll and slowly stuffed it into the eggshell, leaving only a corner outside. Then, I walked to Lin Yuetong's bedside and guided my energy into the soul-inquiring talisman. Then, the corner of the talisman on the outside of the eggshell suddenly burned. In an instant, the entire egg turned red. However, no matter how fiercely the talisman burned, the eggshell didn't crack. I also didn't feel any heat when I held the eggshell. Chapter 105. Dai Nanzhou and the others looked at me curiously. At this time, Zhou Shi couldn't help but ask, "Brother Zhou, what's the use of this egg?" I smiled and said, "Don't look down on this egg. In our profession, an egg, especially a perfectly round egg, represents Tai Chi. The egg white and the egg yolk represent the primal chaos of yin and yang. A person's soul is in chaos and doesn't have a consciousness. Only through this egg can we communicate with it." "You can use this egg to communicate with a person's soul?" Dai Nanzhou's eyes were filled with disbelief as he asked. I shook my head. "It's not enough to rely on this egg. We need this soul-inquiring talisman." Then, I didn't explain further and placed the egg between Lin Yuetong's eyebrows. The egg was perfectly round, and a person's forehead was flat. Normally, the egg wouldn't be stable. However, after I let go, the perfectly round egg stood upright and didn't move an inch. The curiosity in the eyes of the surrounding people became stronger. After everything was done, I asked Dai Nanzhou and the others to close all the doors and windows of the dormitory. I also covered all the curtains. The originally bright dormitory room instantly darkened. I found a candle, lit it, and placed it on Lin Yuetong's bedside. "You can stand here and watch. However, without my permission, don't talk or take deep breaths," I reminded them. After Wang Yongjun and the others heard me, their faces became solemn. They nodded and promised me that they wouldn't talk. I stretched out my hand and gathered my Tao energy to touch the hole in the eggshell. Then, I opened my mouth and read, "Ask the spirit and open the spirit. Ferry the soul and the person." 3 souls returned to their original position. "Lin Yuetong, do you know why you are unconscious?" After I said that, everyone's eyes gazed at Lin Yuetong. However, she was still lying there without moving. It seemed that she didn't have any reaction. Asking the spirit required time. I had to use my Tao energy to temporarily open the spirit of Lin Yuetong's soul. Only then would she respond to me. I wasn't in a hurry at all. I sat there and waited quietly. On the other hand, Dai Nanzhou and the others were affected by the quiet and solemn atmosphere in the dormitory room. Everyone's breathing became heavy, which was very clear in the quiet room. I knew that they probably didn't have anything to fear, but that was how people were. Their emotions were easily influenced by their surroundings. That was why I had warned them not to breathe too deeply. However, they were standing far away from Lin Yuetong. As long as they didn't breathe directly at Lin Yuetong, it wouldn't affect her too much. I wasn't too worried. Around 7 or 8 minutes later, the candle by Lin Yuetong's bedside table suddenly flickered. A cold wind came out of nowhere and blew a few strands of Lin Yuetong's hair. Feeling the cold wind, I felt happy and looked at Lin Yuetong's face. What's wrong with me? Lin Yuetong's lips didn't move, but a timid woman's voice arose. It sounded a little illusory. You're in a coma. I used a talisman to temporarily open the spirit of your soul. Now your soul is communicating with me. You don't need to be afraid. Tell me why you're unconscious. After I asked, the timid woman's voice disappeared. She didn't say anything for quite a long time. Just as I was getting impatient, the voice arose one more time. She hesitantly said, I'm not possessed. I've been like this since I was a child. Every few years, I would suddenly bark like a dog in my sleep. After that, I would fall into a coma. I went to see a doctor, and the doctor said that I have a fetish for mimicry, which is accompanied by epilepsy. Fetish for mimicry? Epilepsy? I frowned. If Dai Nanzhou had told me this before, I would have believed her. However, her mother had chanted Buddhist scriptures to her, and her weak soul had told me that it wasn't that simple. I said in a low voice, Lin Yuetong, you've been in a coma for 3 days. Your soul is very weak, and something bad could happen at any time. Moreover, I can't contact your family. If you don't tell me the truth, I won't be able to help you if something bad happens. You should think about the consequences yourself. The voice went silent. Around half a minute later, she said, Actually, my symptoms are related to my family's factory. However, I don't know if I'm possessed or not. Lin Yuetong finally opened her heart. I exhaled in relief and quietly listened to her story. Lin Yuetong wasn't a native of Shenzhen. She was from Yulin City, which was located in the southeast of Guangxi. Yulin City had a long history, and it was known as the Dog Forest in ancient times. There was a local proverb that said, "Fish is raw during the winter solstice, and dog is eaten during the summer solstice." Thus, when the summer solstice arrived, the local people would eat dog meat and eat lychees. Gradually, it became a custom, and there was a festival called the Yulin Lychee Dog Meat Festival. The local custom of eating dog meat was very popular, and there were many proverbs that mentioned it. For example, after eating dog meat, don't cover yourself with a blanket, rolling dog meat 3 times, even the gods can't stand still, dog meat is fragrant, Buddha jumps over the wall, dog on the summer solstice, dog has nowhere to go, fish is raw during the winter solstice, dog on the summer solstice, how many delicacies are there in a year, and so on. In recent years, the annual Lychee Dog Meat Festival in Yulin caused a large number of dogs to be slaughtered. People from all walks of life denounced and opposed this event. Some people even called it the Yulin Slaughter Incident. Since the local dog meat was consumed a lot, many related industries were created. Lin Yuetong's father operated a local slaughterhouse, which specialized in slaughtering dogs. Mr. Lin had entered the business early. More than 20 years ago, before Lin Yuetong was born, he had already operated this slaughterhouse. He lived there until he got married and had children. In other words, Lin Yuetong was born and raised in this slaughterhouse. According to her, when dogs were killed in the slaughterhouse, some dogs would always let out violent screams before they died. When she was still a baby, she was awakened by the screams of a dog when she was sleeping. At that time, she became stupid. After finding someone to take a look at her, they said that she had lost her soul. Then, her parents found someone to help her call her soul. Gradually, she got better. But from then on, every once in a while, Lin Yuetong would inexplicably bark like a dog in her sleep. Then, she would become stupid and wouldn't recognize anyone. At the same time, her whole body would twitch and she would fall into a coma. The symptoms were exactly the same as this time. At that time, her parents took her to see a doctor, and also to Yin Yang Xian. The doctor said that she had epilepsy and mimicry, while Yin Yang Xian said that when she was a child, she didn't call back her own soul. Instead, she called back the soul of a dog, which was why she got this strange disease in the future. Both sides said different things, but the same thing was that there was nothing they could do about her illness. Later on, when her mother took her to a temple to pray to Buddha, she accidentally heard some Buddhist scriptures. That was when she calmed down and gradually got better. From then on, her mother bought a lot of Buddhist scriptures and read them silently every day. When she had an attack, she would read them to her. It was very effective every time. But this time, she didn't know why she was in a coma. After listening to her, I vaguely understood. However, I didn't agree with her. When she was a child, she was scared by a dog's barking and lost her soul. Then, she called for a dog's soul. It was impossible if she didn't know anything about geomancy. The result of my consideration was that her mother had been affected by the resentful energy in the slaughterhouse when she had been pregnant with her. Lin Yuetong, who had been in the womb at that time, was at the stage where her 3 souls had formed, just like Tong Tong. The difference was that Tong Tong died when his 3 souls were formed, but Lin Yuetong was affected by the dog soul that was full of resentment when her 3 souls were formed. There were some dog souls in her soul, which led to the later symptoms. After understanding all this, I sighed with emotion. When it came to eating dog meat, different people had different views. It was hard to say whether it was right or wrong. However, even if it was a slaughterhouse, they had to pay attention to the way they handled the animals. Chapter 106. There were still a lot of mysteries surrounding Lin Yuetong, but I couldn't get anything out of her. I thought for a while and decided to let her soul go back to rest. Then, I asked Wang Yongjun and the others to leave the dormitory first. Then, I called Tong Tong out of the jade bracelet. Although there were still some doubts that hadn't been solved, it was good to know that Lin Yuetong's illness was in her soul. With a direction, everything would be much easier. Tong Tong was a Yin soul. Moreover, she cultivated the art of godhood, so her understanding of souls was much deeper than mine. It was more suitable for her to deal with Lin Yuetong's problem. As soon as Tong Tong came out, she pulled my arm and said with a smile, "Gidge, I've learned the method to communicate with you that I told you last time. Next time, when you want to talk to me, you just need to think about it and I'll know." I remembered what Tong Tong had told me last time. I was happy. It would be much more convenient now. I didn't expect that the art of godhood that Tong Tong cultivated was even more magical than the Taoist techniques that I had learned. I wanted to try it, but Tong Tong said that I needed to give her a drop of blood. She had to go through a certain ritual first. I took a drop of blood from my finger and was about to ask Tong Tong how to use it. However, before I could open my mouth, Tong Tong walked toward my finger, opened her mouth, and put my finger in her mouth. She gently sucked on my finger before letting go of my finger. She smiled and said to me, "Gidge, it's done. You can try it now." I suddenly had a strange feeling in my heart. Although Tong Tong was a Yin soul, she could grow. When I first met her, she was still a little girl. However, after 4 or 5 years, she had grown a lot taller. According to her age, she should be 12 years old now. Although she had called me Gidge, I had always treated her as my daughter in my heart. But now, as I watched her grow up, I no longer treated her as my daughter. Thinking about this, I frowned and couldn't help but laugh. I shook my head to get rid of this strange thought and tried to use my thoughts to communicate with Tong Tong. My heart skipped a beat. I wanted to ask Tong Tong to help me think. As soon as I finished thinking, Tong Tong giggled and said, "Silly big brother, can't you think of something more complicated?" Say something to me and then I'll answer you. This little girl dared to tease me. I immediately said to her in my mind, then cry for me to see. Tong Tong's voice echoed in my heart. Humph. Bad Gidge, I won't cry. Ah, I can really communicate. It's no different from talking to me. I was full of interest and tried for a long time. Eventually, my curiosity had worn off. I told Tong Tong about Lin Yuetong and asked her to find a way to remove the impurities in Lin Yuetong's soul. The resentment in her soul was tainted when her soul was just formed. It had long since become a part of her soul. Although I have a way to remove it, doing so will inevitably harm her soul. I can swallow the part of her soul that has a problem. Then, I will give her a part of my soul to make up for it. Although I have a way to remove it, it will inevitably harm her soul. After Tong Tong listened to me, she knew the risk of removing her soul. She tilted her head and thought for a while. Then, she said, I can swallow the part of her soul that has a problem. Then, I will give her a part of my soul to make up for her soul. That way she will be fine. I was surprised and asked her, use your own soul? How can you do that? Can't you use other souls? There are so many spirits in the jade bracelet. Can't you use theirs? Tong Tong shook her head. It's the same as the dog's soul. If I use other spirits, her soul will still be impure. Perhaps something like this will happen again. Only if I cut out a part of my soul and erase all the imprints on it to make up for her soul will there be no more problems. Then, Tong Tong smiled and comforted me. Brother, don't worry. I just need to swallow some other spirits to make up for my soul. It won't be a problem. Although she said that, I knew that Tong Tong was a spirit, and her soul was her everything. Cutting out a part of her soul would have a big impact on her. It wasn't something that could be made up for by just swallowing a few spirit. With that in mind, I didn't agree to let Tong Tong take such a risk. However, Tong Tong objected to my decision. She insisted on giving Lin Yuetong her soul. She even threw a little tantrum. I sighed inwardly. Many years had passed, and Tong Tong had even started to swallow the spirits in the jade bracelet at my request. However, her heart hadn't changed. She was still so kind. In the end, I couldn't argue with her and had to agree. Tong Tong's tears turned into a smile. She happily went to give Lin Yuetong her soul. However, after she started to give her soul, she couldn't smile anymore. Swallowing a part of Lin Yuetong's soul and giving it to her to make up for her soul wasn't a big deal. However, cutting a part of her soul from her body was an extremely painful process. Tong Tong was a part of her soul. Cutting a part of her soul was like cutting a piece of flesh from her body. Moreover, it wasn't just a small piece, but an arm or a leg. How could it not be painful? I looked at Tong Tong, who was sitting there. Her body was constantly shivering. I hated that I couldn't bear this pain for her. However, I couldn't do anything about it. After persevering for about 10 minutes, Tong Tong finally removed a large gray, cotton-like object from his body. After this thing was taken out, Tong Tong's entire body became a lot more illusory. Her small face was abnormally pale and exhausted, but her painful expression disappeared. Instead, she revealed a heartfelt smile. She walked over and slowly pressed this part of the soul into the space between Lin Yuetong's eyebrows. After everything was done, she didn't even have the strength to talk to me. She forced a smile at me, then returned to the jade bracelet. After Tong Tong left, I looked at Lin Yuetong, who was lying on the bed. I couldn't feel happy, and I even blamed myself. I wasn't related to her, and I couldn't even get a reward. It was fine that I came to help her, but why did I have to involve Tong Tong? After cursing for a while, I calmed myself down and forced a smile. I opened the door to the dormitory and asked Wang Yongjun and the others to come in. After they came in, She looked at Lin Yuetong, who was still lying on the bed. He asked me skeptically, "Brother Zhou, why hasn't Yuetong woken up yet?" My mood was a little gloomy. I pointed at Lin Yuetong and said, Just wake her up. Zhou Shi was elated. He gently pushed Lin Yuetong a few times. Sure enough, she woke up and slowly opened her eyes. Zhou Shi was so excited that he burst into tears. He hugged Lin Yuetong happily. Lin Yuetong had just woken up, but she didn't know what had happened. When her soul talked to me, she didn't have any memory of what had happened. After Zhou Shi told her what had happened, Lin Yuetong's face changed. She panicked and wanted to call her family. However, the result was the same as before. She couldn't get through. This time, Lin Yuetong didn't care about her weak body. She got off the bed and anxiously said that she had to go home. Dai Nanzhou and Zhou Shi hurried to persuade her. In the end, they agreed to accompany her to her home. Lin Yuetong calmed down a little. After they had agreed, Dai Nanzhou came to me with a smile. "Do you have time?" He said that he wanted to help her to the end. He asked me to go with them to Lin Yuetong's house to solve this problem. There were still many suspicious points about Lin Yuetong. Moreover, Tong Tong had paid a big price to save her. Of course, I wanted to help her to the end. However, Lin Yuetong's house was in Guangxi. I didn't know how long it would take to go there. As for the Metaphysics Society, they were about to go there to observe the true dragon's vein. They didn't have enough time. Dai Nanzhou didn't know about this matter, but Wang Yongjun did. Without waiting for me to open my mouth, he stopped Dai Nanzhou and said, "Brother Zhou has something important to do recently, so he can't delay it. This matter can only be put aside for now. How about this, Nanzhou? I'll have little Zhao arrange a few people to go with you and see the situation first." After listening to him, Dai Nanzhou and the others nodded in agreement. However, I thought that this matter was related to the metaphysics. Even if Chief Wang arranged some people to go there, it wouldn't be possible to rely on ordinary people to deal with the situation. I called Yang Kaichen and briefly explained the situation to him. "Do you have time to go with Dai Nanzhou and the others?" Yang Kaichen and I hadn't known each other for a long time, and our age gap was quite big. However, our friendship wasn't shallow. Of course, I didn't say anything and directly agreed. After settling this matter, Wang Yongjun forcefully dragged me to a banquet. He said that it was to welcome and send me off, and also to celebrate the fact that I had won 2 championships in the previous exchange meeting. He wanted me to attend this banquet no matter what. I couldn't refuse, so I agreed. Then, Wang Yongjun called Yang Kaichen and a few people he was familiar with in the metaphysics world. We went to a famous Chinese restaurant in Shenzhen and spent the whole night there. During the banquet, he gave me a new contract and increased my annual salary to 5 million renminbi. To be honest, after I had agreed to join his company, I hadn't done a single thing. Not only did I take the money, but I also had to increase my salary. I was embarrassed, but Wang Yongjun didn't say anything. He insisted on increasing my salary. In the end, I couldn't refuse, so I agreed. It wasn't until the early morning of the next day that I returned to the hotel in the car that Wang Yongjun had arranged for me. I drank a lot of wine at the banquet, but I didn't use my Dao energy to expel the alcohol. I was in a tipsy state and my head felt dizzy. However, when I returned to my room, I lifted my head and sobered up. My room's door was open. While I was frowning, a woman's voice came from my room. Chapter 107. Who was it that dared to barge into my room? My drunkenness disappeared in an instant, and I tensed up. Since she had barged into my room, she definitely didn't have any good intentions. Moreover, she was waiting for me so casually. It was obvious that she was fearless, so I had to be careful. Before I could speak, the voice spoke again. "Why are you standing at the door? Come in and talk." I finally recognized the voice. It sounded familiar, but I couldn't remember who it was at the moment. I pondered whether it was a blessing or a curse, and if it was a curse, I couldn't avoid it. Thus, I braced myself and walked in. The light in the room wasn't turned on, and there wasn't a trace of light in the room. After I walked in, I lifted my head and saw a black figure sitting on the sofa by the window. I inserted the room card, and the light in the room instantly lit up the room. Only then did I see a young woman sitting on the sofa. She was fair and slender, wearing a white dress. Under the warm yellow light in the room, she was dazzlingly beautiful. However, her pretty face was cold and calm without any expression, which made people subconsciously feel her pride. Ye Piampian, didn't she go to look for the real dragon vein? Why did she come back so quickly? Moreover, how did she find the hotel I was staying at? I frowned and had a series of questions in my mind, but I felt more relaxed. After all, she was a member of the Metaphysics Association. Although her behavior of barging into my room in the middle of the night was a little unfriendly, she wouldn't attack me. Why did you come back so quickly? Did something happen on the way? I sat down on a chair not far from her and asked her with a smile. Who knew that Ye Piampian wouldn't respond to my question and turned to look at me. Her gaze seemed to be filled with intense disgust, which made me very uncomfortable. After looking at me for a while, she said coldly, "Tell me about the real dragon vein." Hearing that, I instantly got angry. Previously, she had suspected that I was lying, and now she suddenly came over and asked me to repeat it. She must still think that I wasn't telling the truth. I stood up abruptly, and my expression became cold. I said to her, "Miss Yi, you can doubt my words, but I also have the right to choose whether to answer your question or not. There's nothing more to say about this matter. You should go back and not disturb my rest." To be honest, I wanted to curse her in my heart. However, she was the vice president of the Metaphysics Association and her cultivation base was much higher than mine. I had no choice but to suppress the anger in my heart and said those words to her. At this time, Ye Piampian's expression finally changed. She turned to look at me with interest and even sneered. She said to me, "You seem to be mistaken. You don't have the right to choose. Sit down and tell me the truth about the true dragon's veins." I was stunned. Does this woman want to turn against me? In the dead of the night, there was no one else around. Her identity as the metaphysics colleague didn't restrict her at all. If she wanted to attack me, I wouldn't have any way to deal with it. Right now, the most powerful killing move I have is the spirits in the jade bracelet, but those spirits can only be controlled by my eyes. Tong's soul had been divided into many parts, so he was at his weakest. He could only stay in the jade bracelet to swallow souls to heal. He couldn't come out to help me. Moreover, even if Tong could come to help me, it was hard to say if those spirits could deal with this beautiful woman. When I first saw Zhao Yongquan, I thought that the glory of consciousness realm was just SOSO, but Yang Shilong's cultivation base broke my understanding. With the cultivation base that Yang Shilong had displayed, it was hard to say if those spirits could trap him, let alone Ye Piampian, who Yang Shilong had to curry favor with. After thinking for a while, I finally admitted defeat and lowered my stance. I sighed and said, "Miss Yi, I don't know why you suspect that I'm not telling the truth, but I'm telling the truth about the true dragon's veins. I didn't hide anything." The fatty's father had already entered the fire god temple to save the fatty. No matter what, I definitely couldn't let the people from the Metaphysics Association delay this matter. Thus, I could only bite the bullet and lie. After saying that, I was a little scared and prepared for Ye Piampian to attack me at any moment. However, the strange thing was that Ye Piampian said to me, "It doesn't matter if you're lying or not. Tell me the whole story again." Tell it again? Is there something wrong with this woman? Feng Shui masters have a good memory, especially someone with such a powerful cultivation. Last time, she asked me to explain it to her. Could it be that she still doesn't remember it? Does she need me to explain it again? I didn't understand what she meant, but I didn't have any other choice. I could only bite the bullet and repeat what I told her previously. Ye Piampian sat there without moving and stared at me without blinking. She seemed to be listening very seriously. After I finished, Yi Pianpian moved her gaze away and looked outside the window. She asked me with a faint voice, "That's it?" I nodded. That's it. I was also a feng shui master that was about to step into the glory of consciousness realm. My memory was also very good. What I said this time was exactly the same as what I said to her last time. I thought that Yi Pianpian would be enraged or even attack me after hearing what I said. But strangely, she stood up from the sofa, turned around and glanced at me. Then, she walked away with light step. She left directly. Even after her figure had completely disappeared, I still hadn't reacted. What did this crazy woman mean? She barged into my room in the middle of the night just to make fun of me? I thought for a long time, but I still didn't know what was wrong with her. However, no matter what, she didn't attack me, which was a blessing in disguise. This woman was too strange. She was fooled by me again. Who knew if she would suddenly feel that something was wrong and come back to find me? I quickly closed the door and inserted the safety latch. Although I knew that these couldn't stop her with her strength, it could at least give me a warning. I didn't sleep much for the rest of the night. I sat cross-legged on the bed and kept my guard up. However, that crazy woman didn't appear again until morning. It seemed that she had really left. I was confused and decided to put this matter to the back of my mind. I got up and washed my face. Then, I ate breakfast in the hotel before heading to the Metaphysics Society. President Su had told me that the time to observe the true dragon's vein would be in a few days. However, he didn't tell me what to pay attention to. Moreover, he hadn't finished the procedures to promote me to the vice president. Since I had nothing to do, I decided to go to the Metaphysics Society to handle the procedures. After being promoted to the vice president, I would be assigned an office in the Metaphysics Society. Although it was called an office, it was more like an apartment with a bedroom and a study room. People could live there. What happened to Yi Pianpian last night made me a little nervous. It wasn't safe to stay in the hotel. After finishing the procedures, I decided to move to the Metaphysics Society. The Metaphysics Society had a formation set up by the previous president. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to get in. Even if Yi Pianpian came back to deal with me, she was still a member of the Metaphysics Society. It wasn't a big deal if she attacked me outside, but inside the Metaphysics Society, she still had to care about her reputation. Just as I was on my way to the Metaphysics Society, I received a call from President Su. He must have received the news that I was coming back. He called me to go and handle the procedures for the promotion. I hurried to the Metaphysics Society. When I reached the top floor, I was surprised to see President Su waiting for me at the elevator. When I got out of the elevator, he was standing with his back facing the elevator door. He was looking at the place where the stone of Mount Tai had been placed. Ever since I used the jade bracelet to absorb the dragon's vein energy from the stone of Mount Tai, the Metaphysics Society had investigated for a long time. In the end, they couldn't find any valuable clues. They could only conclude that the dragon's energy on the stone of Mount Tai had been used up for a long time. Thus, the Metaphysics Society removed the stone of Mount Tai, leaving the place bare. It didn't look good. But this time, there was a potted peach tree. It looked lush and green. I didn't know who did it. President Su was looking at the peach tree. When I called him, he turned his head and expressionlessly looked at me. "Come with me." I found it a bit strange. Although Chairman Su's personality was usually rather cold, ever since I won the Double Champions title, his attitude towards me had become much better. When he spoke, he would even smile. Today, I came to handle the procedures for the promotion. No matter what, it was a happy occasion. Why did he have such a dark face? Before I could figure it out, President Su had already walked back to his office. I could only follow him. When we reached the door of President Su's office, I followed him. When I was about to say something, President Su suddenly moved to the side. He walked past me and directly left the office. He even closed the door behind him. I didn't expect that he would do that. When I got a hold of myself, President Su was gone, and the door to his office was closed. I felt a sense of crisis. But before I could react, an old voice came from the office. Was it you who killed my Ah-ing and took her Chilingu? The voice was hoarse and unpleasant. Moreover, the tone was strange. Although she was speaking Mandarin, it took me a long time to understand what she was saying. Then, cold sweat flowed down my forehead. That Miao girl, Zhao-ing, had said that her mother would come to find me. After that incident, I had been very careful. I even joined the Shenzhen school selection branch because of this incident. From then on, no matter if it was getting in touch with President Su or trying my best to win the competition, it was all because I wanted the Metaphysics Society and President Su's protection. However, I didn't expect that President Su would betray me and bring me to this old Gu woman. Chapter 108. After a few seconds of silence, I turned my head and looked at the chair that President Su used to sit behind the desk. Zhao Ying's mother, the old witch in front of me, had a strange, old, and hoarse voice. However, it was out of my expectation that she wasn't the white-haired old woman that I had imagined. Instead, she was around 50 years old. Although her hair was a little white, I could still see the charm of her youth on her face. What was even stranger was that the old witch didn't look like she had been through many hardships. She didn't have any terrifying aura, and she was wearing ordinary, outdated clothes. At first glance, she looked like a middle-aged woman who had just come to the city from the countryside. In fact, for a moment I could even see some similarities between her and my mother. I shook my head, and put President Su's matter aside. I tried to make my voice sound calm and said to her, "I'm very sorry about Zhao Ying's matter. There was a reason for it, so I didn't directly attack her. I just wanted to get rid of her Gu. However, because I didn't know much about Gu, I didn't know that her mother was the life Gu. That's why I killed her. Zhao Ying had told me that even if I had the Gu King, I wouldn't be a match for her mother." After that, I analyzed her words. She must have mistaken the snake spirit for the king of venomous worms. That's why she said that. However, the serpent spirit was just a Yin soul. Although it had the experience of turning into a flood dragon and its power wasn't ordinary, the serpent spirit wasn't strong after it had become a Yin soul. At least, it wasn't as strong as the Gu King that Zhao Ying had mentioned. It wasn't a match for the old witch. Tong Tong was still recovering, and President Su had betrayed me. At this moment I could only rely on myself. However, my power was too weak. If I fought against this old witch, I wouldn't have any hope of surviving. That was why I could only try my best to negotiate with her and hope that she could reason with me. The old witch's image was different from what I had expected. From her appearance, she didn't seem like a person that was hard to communicate with. However, what she said next shattered the last bit of hope I had. "I know what happened to Ying. It doesn't matter if you killed her by mistake or not. Just admit that you killed her." The old witch's face was calm, and her voice didn't fluctuate. It seemed she had just sentenced me to death. Then, she continued, "I can no longer sense the aura of the Kirin Gu. It should be dead. Let me ask you again, how did you kill the Kirin Gu?" The magic compass and the snake spirit were all secrets that I had always kept hidden. But at this moment, in the face of life and death, there was no longer any meaning in keeping secrets. I kept silent for a while, then told her about the magic compass and the snake spirit. I even told her that I had found a way to remove the Yin energy from the snake spirit's body. I just hid the existence of the pupil. After I told her everything, the old witch's expression changed for the first time. She frowned and said, "You're lying." When her face changed, I finally felt a murderous aura from her body. Her temperament of a middle-aged countrywoman had dissipated quite a bit and was replaced by a kind of oppressive aura. I had seen this kind of aura from Yang Shilong and Yi Pianpian. Although the witchcraft of Miaojiang was different from feng shui, It was still part of metaphysics. As long as her power was released, I could directly feel it. My heart sank as I hastily said, "I'm not lying at all. I have the magic artifact, the compass, and the snake spirit with me. If you don't believe me, I can call them out for you to question them." The old witch's expression calmed down a little. She nodded and said, "Give me the compass. I'll check them myself." I had already taken out the magic compass, and was about to summon the snake spirit. However, I shook my head after hearing her words. "Senior, this is mine. I'll summon them and you can ask them, but I can't give them to you." From the old witch's attitude, it was almost impossible for her to let me go. It would be ridiculous for me to hand over the only magic tool that I could use to fight for her forgiveness. If I had no other choice and had to die, I hoped that I could die with dignity. Just as I thought, my words had enraged the old witch. She squinted her eyes and laughed strangely with her hoarse voice. As she laughed, I didn't see her move, but my heart skipped a beat. Then, I felt a sharp pain that seemed to come from the depths of my soul. I couldn't stand straight and slumped to the ground. At the same time, I threw the compass in my hand. It fell right in front of the old witch's feet. She looked at me with pity and disdain. Then, she calmly picked up the compass from the ground. She turned it around and looked at it. "You're really lucky. You got this kind of coincidental spirit magic tool." Then, she sighed and said regretfully, "It's a pity that only people from the Central Plains like you can use it. We, the people of Miaojiang, only believe in goo." The old witch suddenly threw the compass away. It hit the wall and made a loud thud. I didn't know if it was broken or not. I was still in pain, so I didn't have time to think about it. I lifted my head in a daze and saw the compass hit the wall. I didn't know what method the old witch had used, but the snake spirit got out of the compass. "Hey kid, what's wrong with you? I haven't seen you for a few days, but your power has increased a lot. Anyway, why are you lying on the ground?" The snake spirit was still a chatterbox. As soon as it came out, it chattered for a long time. Then it seemed to notice the old goo woman. It glanced at her and then said, "Why is there another person from Miaojiang? Let me see your goo. Oh my god, it's the Qilin goo again." The snake spirit couldn't believe it. Its giant black body jerked backward, as if it was scared. "Let me tell you something first. The Qilin goo last time has nothing to do with me. If you want to take revenge, don't look for me. Just look for that kid." The snake spirit was scared. It didn't hesitate to throw me out to be its shield. However, the old witch's expression was strange. She looked at the snake spirit with a blank face. She looked even more shocked than the snake spirit. After the snake spirit had rambled on for a long time, the old goo woman slowly spat out 2 words. "Dragon goo." "Dragon goo? What's that?" I was in great pain, and my consciousness was fading. I dizzily thought about the meaning of these 2 words. "What dragon goo?" "I'm telling you, don't talk nonsense. I admit that I ate a small Qilin goo, but it was a coincidence. That small Qilin goo came to me and asked me to eat it. Do you think I wouldn't eat it? You can't treat me as a goo just because I ate your small Qilin goo, right? Pooh. I'm a dragon, a real dragon." The old witch didn't care about the snake spirit. Her eyes were still fixed on the snake spirit. She mumbled to herself, "A dragon goo that can form a een spirit. How could it be? How could it be?" After mumbling for a long time, the old witch seemed to have made up her mind. She opened her mouth and said, "It seems it's not a legend. It's real. Kid, I don't care how you got this dragon goo een spirit. You people from the Central Plains talk about fate. Although I'm from the Miao tribe, I believe in fate. I thought I would never have a chance. Who would have thought that I would meet you here? I wanted to kill you, but now I can't. I have to plant the Qilin goo in you, the real Qilin goo." Then, the old witch walked toward me. She reached out her hand and lifted me to President Su's desk. Then, she took off her clothes in front of me. However, she only took off the dark blue robe that she was wearing on the surface, and then she stopped moving. Before I could react, blood gushed out of her mouth. Then, she stooped and vomited blood. Each mouthful of blood landed on the dark blue robe she had taken off earlier. In the end, she even vomited pieces of dark red meat. It looked disgusting and strange. I didn't know how long she had vomited. Anyway, the dark blue robe was soaked in blood. It had a strange dark red hue, and there was a layer of sticky meat paste on it. After doing all that, she threw the robe in her hands onto me. The robe seemed to shrink automatically. After she threw it at me, it wrapped around me and shrank continuously. Chapter 109. I didn't know how long it had been, but my consciousness slowly returned from the endless darkness. The pain in my body had disappeared. I still felt a burning sensation, but it wasn't painful at all. Quite the contrary, it made me feel warm. After opening my eyes, I looked around. I wasn't in Vice President Sue's office anymore. I was in a lush forest. From the man-made benches and stone benches around, it seemed to be a remote park. Why am I here? It should be the old goo woman or Chairman Sue who threw me here, right? I struggled to move, but I didn't have any energy left in my body. I didn't even have the strength to lift my head. I decided to lie down and move the Tao energy in my body. While recovering my strength, I checked my body's condition. After a long time, my strength slowly recovered, but I still couldn't find anything wrong with my body. I could only give up on checking and slowly tried to sit up. At this moment, I was still wearing the old insect woman's dark blue robe. However, the dark red color was gone, and the feeling of being wrapped around my body was also gone. After I sat up, I pulled on the robe and tried to pull it up. However, the dark blue robe was torn like a piece of paper. As soon as I pulled, I tore the robe apart and pulled it off my body. After taking off the robe, my clothes were also ragged. It looked like they had been worn for dozens of years. A pungent smell wafted into my nostrils and made me choke. How did it turn out like this? I felt strange. Before I fainted, although I was in pain, I heard the old insect woman say that she would plant a real Kirin insect on me. I also saw the disgusting flesh and blood she had vomited. However, I didn't feel anything strange on my body. Quite the contrary, my clothes were rotten. It can't be that the old goo woman planted a goo worm on my clothes, right? I thought it was strange. Then, I decided to take off my clothes. As soon as I took off my clothes, I felt that something was wrong. There was a tattoo on my chest. On the left side of my chest, there was a strange beast head pattern that looked like a deer but wasn't a deer. It looked like a lion but wasn't a lion. A beautiful horn extended from my heart all the way to my collarbone. The beast head was slightly lowered and the pattern was extremely clear. I could even see the fine spiral patterns on the horn. The beast's head was covered with silver-brown fur from head to neck, making it look exceptionally handsome. However, from my neck down, there was only a faint trace. It looked as though it was about to emerge from my body, but it hadn't yet. What is this? I lowered my head to look at it for a long time. Then, I remembered the Kirin goo that the old witch had mentioned. Isn't this a picture of a Kirin's head? A lion's head, deer's antlers, tiger's eyes, an elk's body, dragon's scales, an ox's tail, and a horn with meat. This was what the Kirin looked like in the records. Although I didn't have a body underneath, I could tell that it was a Kirin from the one-horned beast head that looked like a deer and a lion. Last time, I had seen Zhao Ying's Kirin goo, which had been eaten by the spirit snake. However, it was just a meaty worm. The old witch had given me a Kirin goo. Was it a Kirin? But even if it was true, I had never heard of a goo that could make a tattoo on a person's body. It was unbelievable. I sat there and pondered for a while. Then, I lowered my head to look at it. The more I looked at it, the more I felt that it didn't look like a tattoo. This design was simply too perfect. It looked as if a living qilin was imprinted on my chest. In fact, the only eye that could be seen was filled with disdain for the world. It gave off an indescribable aura. I couldn't understand it no matter how I looked at it. I put this matter aside and wrapped my tattered clothes around my body. Then, I stood up and left the place. After looking for a long time, I found out that this was a park in the downtown area of Shenzhen. It wasn't too far from the hotel I was staying at. I searched my body for a long time. Fortunately, although my clothes were tattered, my wallet, jade bracelet, and other things were still there. The only thing missing was the magical compass the old witch had taken. I took out all the money in my wallet and stood at the entrance of the park to call for a taxi. Probably because I looked like a homeless person, all the taxi drivers chose to ignore me. In the end, I had no choice but to wave a handful of money at them. Finally, one of them stopped. When I returned to the hotel, the staff didn't stop me. I had been staying here for a long time, and I went in and out every day. The security guards at the entrance knew me. However, there were other guests in the lobby. They gawked and dropped their jaws in shock. They watched me get into the elevator. After returning to my room, I took off all my clothes and went to the bathroom to take a shower. I felt much better after that. There was a big mirror in the bathroom. From the mirror, I could see the tattoo on my chest clearly. It was a tattoo of a Qilin's head. Moreover, it was terrifyingly exquisite. Every hair and every inch of the skin was perfect. It was as if someone had sprayed paint on my skin. It didn't look like a tattoo. I tried to gather the energy in my body into the area of the tattoo. In just a blink of an eye, the tattoo had absorbed half of my energy. I was startled. Then, I took a closer look. The Qilin's neck, which used to be illusory, seemed to have become more solid. Moreover, some illusory dark blue skin had appeared underneath. I closed my eyes and carefully sensed it. Even if I didn't gather my energy there, the energy in my body would slowly gather there. Then, it would gradually disperse. In just a blink of an eye, my heart became gloomy. I wasn't upset because my hard-earned energy was disappearing. It was because the Qilin tattoo was growing while my energy was disappearing. It meant that the energy in my body was constantly nourishing this Qilin tattoo. Was this the Qilin goo? It was constantly absorbing the energy in my body to strengthen itself. What would happen when the Qilin's body grew at night? I didn't dare to imagine, but I knew that nothing good would happen. What scared me even more was that my body and the energy in my body didn't reject the Qilin tattoo at all. It was as if this tattoo was a part of my body. I took out the jade bracelet. There was still thick dragon energy for me to absorb. Soon, I could replenish the energy in my body that had been absorbed by the Qilin tattoo. However, I hesitated whether I should replenish it or not. I even hesitated whether I should continue my cultivation path. As long as I continued to cultivate, the energy in my body would increase, and I would reach a higher realm in the future, and the Qilin tattoo would become stronger. The bigger it was, the more danger I would be in. Perhaps if I stopped cultivating, the tattoo wouldn't become stronger. Would I be safe? As soon as this thought popped up, I rejected it. Even if this method could suppress the Qilin tattoo, what if the old witch came looking for me again? No, passively running away wasn't a solution. I had to continue cultivating. The Qilin tattoo was getting stronger, and I was getting stronger as well. I had to find a way to deal with the Qilin tattoo before it was completely formed. Only then could I get rid of this problem. With that thought in mind, I took the jade bracelet and absorbed all the dragon energy in it into my body. Then, I slowly replenished the energy that I had lost. Once the energy was replenished, my body would completely recover. Then, I looked at the time. I should have only been unconscious for one night. I calculated the time. The team from the Metaphysics Society to observe the true dragon vein would be departing in the afternoon. I was now faced with a choice. Should I return to the Metaphysics Society? I don't know why President Su betrayed me, but since he betrayed me, there's no other possibility for the relationship between us. We can only be mortal enemies who can't live under the same sky. If I had the ability now, I would definitely make Chairman Su pay for his actions. However, I didn't have that ability. I could only consider whether he would harm me or not. After careful consideration, I decided to go to the Metaphysics Society. First, I had to go to the True Dragon Vein. Secondly, I still had the Chief's Seal. I didn't have the chance to use it against the old witch, but I felt that I had a chance against Chairman Sue. After making up my mind, I got up and rushed to the Metaphysics Society. When I reached the top floor of the Metaphysics Society, the other 9 qualified people were already there. They were waiting for me. Chairman Sue was the leader of the group. He was standing in front of the other 9 people. After seeing me, Chairman Sue frowned. He seemed a little surprised, but he didn't say anything. When we went downstairs, he purposely stopped me and walked at the back. Then, he explained to me what had happened yesterday. Just as I thought, the old witch was much stronger than him. After we found him, if he didn't bring me there, he would die. That's why he felt guilty and told me that he didn't have a choice. I smiled and shook my head. I didn't say anything, but I caught up with the others and went downstairs. I wasn't naive enough to think that he would feel guilty and do something to compensate me. On the contrary, if a guilty person didn't want to be tormented by guilt, the only way was to kill the person that made him feel guilty. Once he apologized, it meant that he was prepared to continue hurting you. Chapter 110. At noon, the Metaphysics Association held a send-off ceremony for us. Of course, although it was called a ceremony, it was actually just a meal. During the meal, President Sue warmly encouraged all of us. He even specially patted my shoulder and said, "Little Zhou, you are this year's champion. After you return, I hope that our Shenzhen branch will have another one-vein Earth Master." After observing the True Dragon Vein, as long as one's talent wasn't too bad, they would be able to draw qi like a pillar in a short period of time. Then, they would receive the baptism of dragon qi and open their meridians. None of the people who were selected to observe the True Dragon Vein were lacking in talent. Therefore, during the True Dragon Vein observation ceremony, the most important thing was not the process of absorbing the dragon qi, but the process of opening up the meridians and reaching the acupoints realm. At that time, the National Metaphysics Association would hold a ceremony called the Young Phoenix Gathering. They would arrange for experienced feng shui masters to protect those who had just finished observing the True Dragon Vein and had reached the qi drawing pillar realm, so that they could undergo the baptism of dragon qi. Since the feng shui masters that came out of the dragon seizing tournament were all below the age of 30, it was called the Young Phoenix Gathering. No matter how good one's ranking was in the exchange, it only proved that one's knowledge of feng shui was good. However, the Young Phoenix Gathering was different. The Young Phoenix Gathering only looked at one's talent. If one could amaze the world during the Young Phoenix Gathering, one could even become famous. Although fame was only in the metaphysics world, high officials and wealthy merchants were inseparable from the metaphysics world. The Young Phoenix Gathering's fame was enough to influence these people. Moreover, no matter how good one's performance was, it would only be like me, obtaining a one-time use magic tool like the Champion's Seal. However, if one could amaze the world during the Young Phoenix Gathering, it meant that one had the talent of at least a one-meridian geomaster. In the future, one could even see the light of becoming a heavenly master. This was something that billions of one-time use magic tools couldn't compare to. Thus, all the participating feng shui masters, no matter who they were, felt a burning passion in their hearts. Of course, this included me. The process of opening meridians wasn't like absorbing dragon qi. It could be dangerous, so the Metaphysics Association would arrange for experienced feng shui masters to protect us. This was also one of the reasons why I hadn't taken the initiative to open my meridians. However, the more important reason was that I wanted to challenge the Young Phoenix Gathering. I did not know what Chairman Sue was thinking. However, on the surface, he seemed to have high expectations for me. He even used the term first vein geomaster. After all, a geomaster might even be able to obtain the top spot in the Young Phoenix Gathering. The Young Phoenix Gathering was a grand gathering for all the young feng shui masters in the country. Compared to it, the champion of the gathering was like a firefly. After hearing President Su's words, the faces of the other 9 geomancers of the Guangdong branch changed. Some of them even sneered and looked at me with hostility. The tallest tree in the forest will be destroyed by the wind. After all, I'm the champion of the dragon seizing tournament, so it's normal for them to be hostile towards me. But right after that, a guy with an arrogant expression said coldly, "The Young Phoenix Gathering is based on talent. What's the use of having good feng shui knowledge? Our Metaphysics Association has never won the Young Phoenix Gathering after the dragon seizing tournament's champion." I looked at this guy and vaguely remembered that he was from the Guangzhou branch. He was the last of the top 10 in this year's dragon seizing tournament. It was no wonder that he was so hostile towards me, the champion of the Young Phoenix Gathering. You're right. Most young geniuses are more arrogant than ordinary people. It's hard for them to study feng shui. That's why they don't show their talents in the dragon seizing tournament. But at the Young Phoenix Gathering, they might amaze the world. Unlike me, who has mediocre aptitude, I can only fight for the dragon seizing tournament's championship. I hope that everyone will amaze the world at the Young Phoenix Gathering. There's no need to argue with this kind of unsophisticated youngster. I chuckled as I replied to him. Immediately, this fellow shut his mouth. His hostility towards me also decreased by a lot. However, the arrogant expression on his face increased a bit. It seemed that he really believed my words. But at that moment, Zhang Wenfei, who was standing not far from me, suddenly sneered and coldly said, "A full bottle doesn't move, a half bottle shakes. A full bottle doesn't move, a half bottle shakes. Su Shuxing, you've become more and more shameless these past few years." He seemed to be an old acquaintance of this person. His tone wasn't polite at all. This time, Su Shuxing exploded. He opened his mouth and said, "Zhang Wenfei, what do you mean by that? I think you're the half bottle. Why don't we compete again and see whose ranking is higher in the Young Phoenix Gathering?" Zhang Wenfei chuckled coldly. "When have you ever won against me? You still have the nerve to compete with me? You're really shameless." From his words, it seemed that the two of them had competed many times before. But in this dragon seizing tournament, Zhang Wenfei's ranking was just below mine. Indeed, he was much higher than Su Shuxing. Su Shuxing was so angry that he was panting heavily. He jumped to his feet and said, "Fine, you tell us the rules now, and we'll have a duel. The loser will give up the right to observe the true dragon vein. Do you dare to accept?" This guy really had a firecracker's temper. He even dared to use this kind of thing as a bet. Everyone raised their heads and looked at him in surprise. But I wasn't too surprised. Although this guy wasn't shrewd, his strength wasn't bad. The Tao Qi in his body ranked second among the 10 of us. He was even slightly stronger than Zhang Wenfei. After reaching the Qi gathering realm, I was actually a level higher than the other 9. It was easy to see through their cultivation. Zhang Wenfei wasn't provoked at all. He chuckled again. Before reaching the pressure point realm, a geomancer can only use some talismans. What's important is talent, not strength. Do you think I'm as stupid as you, playing with my future and choosing such a meaningless method to compete with? With that, he continued to pick at the food in front of him with a calm expression. Su Shuxing was so angry that he couldn't speak for a moment. Finally, he said fiercely, "Then let's wait for the Young Phoenix Gathering. When the time comes, your ranking will be below mine. Let's see if you, Zhang Wenfei, still have the right to be arrogant in front of me." At this time, Chairman Su finally opened his mouth and comforted the two with a smile. Zhang Wenfei chuckled and didn't say anything. He only agreed to Su Shuxing's agreement, but in the end, he dragged me into the matter. He smiled and said that he wanted to compete with me. He even asked Su Shuxing if he dared to accept. Su Shuxing was proud and arrogant, so he naturally didn't put me in his eyes. He agreed without hesitation. It seemed that he was completely confident. I didn't say anything, which was a tacit agreement. In any case, I didn't mention the stakes. It didn't matter if I won or lost. Moreover, with Chairman Su here, I would definitely keep a distance from the Metaphysics Association after the Young Phoenix gathering. At the very least, I would leave the Shenzhen branch. At that time, I would have nothing to do with these two. It didn't matter if I won or lost. The noisy farewell party ended. In the afternoon, the Metaphysics Association's bus arrived and picked up the 11 of us. We set off for the capital. The Metaphysics Association's headquarters was in the capital. However, it wasn't in the city, but in the outskirts. Throughout the dynasties, the capital had always been the economic, cultural, and political center. Countless elites from all walks of life gathered here. However, there was one industry where the elites were further away from the capital. That industry was the Metaphysics Association. The dragon veins gathered in the capital, and a purple aura surrounded them. Under such an aura, it was hard for a feng shui master to keep his heart clear. Moreover, the capital was a big whirlpool, and feng shui masters were the guests of high officials. Once something happened, they would be dragged into it. However, that wasn't the most important thing. There was a rumor in the metaphysics world that said that there was a beast in the capital called the Heaven Eater. It fed on the lifespan of the metaphysics experts. This rumor was unbelievable, and no one had ever seen such a thing. However, there was one fact that no one could deny. The average lifespan of the metaphysics experts in the capital was only around 40 years old. It was unbelievable. Although no one believed in the existence of the Heaven Eater, they were still respectful of this rumor. This was also the reason why the Metaphysics Association's headquarters was located in the outskirts of the capital. After a whole night, we finally arrived at the capital the next morning. Originally, we thought that the headquarters was our destination. However, after we arrived, we rested for a day. Then, after the feng shui masters from all over the country had arrived, the Metaphysics Association organized us to travel together. Moreover, this time, all the feng shui masters from all over the country were scattered. Moreover, the team leaders couldn't follow us, and all communication devices couldn't be used. Moreover, every car had an old feng shui master with a profound cultivation. The only function of these feng shui masters was to disrupt the aura of the cars so that the feng shui masters wouldn't be able to tell the direction. There was only one purpose for such a strict method, and that was to protect the true location of the dragon veins. The true dragon veins were the core secrets of the Metaphysics Association and any other Taoist sects in the world. It was also the foundation that supported the existence of these sects and associations. Therefore, it was never too much to be cautious. Chapter 111. After getting off the car, everyone heaved a sigh of relief. Those that could come to observe the true dragon vein were all young geniuses. However, the past 3 days had been like a prison sentence. Who had suffered like this before? Fortunately, after we got out of the car, the old geomancers in the car left one by one. They arranged for some ordinary people to receive us. They took us to a big manor and arranged for us to stay in different rooms according to the list on the list. During this time, no one mentioned any rules to us. The strict atmosphere finally relaxed. However, there was still a strong magnetic field in the manor that made people unable to sense the direction. This wasn't the Metaphysics Association's intention, it was because of the true dragon vein. The true dragon vein itself had a strong magnetic field. It was just like when we arrived at the Yellow Springs River. The satellite phone couldn't be used because of the Fire God Temple's true dragon vein's magnetic field. The branches that were previously disrupted in the car gathered together in the manor and were divided into different areas. Our Shenzhen branch was divided into 5 rooms in the D area. According to the ranking in the dragon seizing competition, 2 people were assigned to a room. I was the champion, and Zhang Wenfei was the second. Naturally, the 2 of us were assigned to the same room. Coincidentally, the room's number was Ding Wu. It was the same name as Zhang Wenfei's master, Grandpa Zhao. Although the physique of a geomancer was stronger than ordinary people, I hadn't rested for 3 days in a row. After staying in the room, I was already very tired. Just as I was about to sleep, Zhang Wenfei pulled me over to chat and asked me if I had experienced any danger in the past few days. I was stunned. Whether it was returning to the Fire God Temple or encountering the old witch, they were all extremely dangerous. How did Zhang Wenfei know? Seeing that my expression wasn't right, Zhang Wenfei smiled and said, "Brother Zhou, don't misunderstand. Didn't my master and I go to remind you to be careful in the near future? A month has passed and Brother Zhou is still as elegant as before. My master must have made an error in judgment." After he said that, I remembered what Grandpa Zhao had told me. However, I had been on guard for a few days. Later on, when we were in danger, I had forgotten what Grandpa Zhao had told me. Looking at it now, whether it was Nangong or Old Man Zhao, they were both reminding me about the old Gu woman. Back then, I thought that with the protection of the Metaphysics Association, I would definitely be able to get through this safely. After the incident, I was filled with regret. No matter what happened, I could only rely on myself. I shouldn't have placed all my bets on the Metaphysics Society and President Su. Now that I have a strange Qilin tattoo on my body, even I can't control my future. I shook my head with a wry smile. Grandfather Zhao didn't make a mistake. I did encounter something. Now that I think about it, I regret not taking Grandfather Zhao's words seriously. Hearing this, Zhang Wenfei's eyes lit up. He lowered his voice and asked, "What does Brother Zhou mean by that?" He didn't expect this guy to be so gossipy. I shook my head and didn't mention the Kirin parasite. I sighed and said, "It's a long story." Seeing that I wasn't willing to talk, Zhang Wenfei went back to his bed in disappointment. But not long after, he opened his mouth and told me about the Young Phoenix gathering. This time I was interested. Although I was the champion of the Dragon Seizing Tournament and was stronger than Zhang Wenfei, I hadn't been in the Metaphysics Association for a long time. Moreover, I didn't have any seniors to guide me, so I didn't understand a lot of common sense in the metaphysics world. Zhang Wenfei came from a prestigious family and joined the Metaphysics Association at a young age, so he knew more about this than I did. After talking with him, I found out that the Young Phoenix Gathering had started when the Metaphysics Association first publicized the True Dragon Vein. Just like the Dragon Seizing Tournament, it was held every 3 years. It was already the 10th Young Phoenix Gathering. Many geniuses had appeared in the previous 9 Young Phoenix Gatherings. He mentioned a few names, but because they were all unfamiliar, I didn't pay much attention to them. But when he mentioned the last name, I couldn't help but be moved. I knew this person. It was Yi Pianpian. Moreover, according to him, Yi Pianpian had become famous during the Young Phoenix Gathering when she opened her meridians and acupoints. How was that possible? Yi Pianpian was already the vice president of the Metaphysics Association, and she was even stronger than Yang Shilong. She had only reached the Young Phoenix Gathering in the previous Young Phoenix Gathering. In other words, she had reached the peak of glorious knowledge from the acupuncture realm in just 3 years. This speed was simply terrifying. I asked Zhang Wenfei, "How many meridians did Yi Pianpian open during the Young Phoenix Gathering?" Zhang Wenfei's face blushed. His face was filled with admiration and adoration. After a while, he raised 3 fingers at me. 3 fingers! Legend had it that Eternal Spring Taoist Qiuchuji was also a 3-meridian Earth Master and had reached the Heavenly Master realm. Moreover, the famous Zhang Daoling, who was known as South Zhang, North Kong, was only a 4-meridian Earth Master. No wonder Yi Pianpian could reach the peak of glorious knowledge in just 3 years and become the vice president of the Metaphysics Association. It turned out that her talent was so terrifying. Not to mention that she was stronger than Yang Shilong. Even the vice president of the Metaphysics Association, Yang Shilong, had to be polite to her when she revealed her talent as a three-meridian Earth Master. She was a true genius that only appeared once in 100 years. I was so shocked that I couldn't speak for a long time. However, Zhang Wenfei became a chatterbox next to me. He kept talking about Yi Piampian with admiration written all over his face. In the end, he said to me complacently, "Brother Zhou, let me tell you, Yi Piampian isn't just talented. She's also terrifyingly beautiful. I have a photo of her. Do you want to see it?" I was stunned. Let alone a photo, I had even seen her in person several times. Moreover, although she was beautiful, she was as arrogant as a phoenix. She wasn't likable at all. What was so rare about her? That was what I thought, but I didn't want to expose the fire god temple. Of course, I didn't tell Zhang Wenfei about it. I just smiled and asked him, "How did you get the photo? Do you know Yi Piampian?" Zhang Wenfei's face turned sour. "I'm not that lucky. I asked my senior brother, who's in charge of the association, to secretly take a photo of her." His answer stunned me. When this fellow talked about the water gathering the heavenly heart feng shui layout, he was also eloquent as if he was a talented young man. How come he was secretly taking photos of her now? He looked like a crazy fan who chased after a celebrity. I wiped my sweat. "Brother Zhang, you don't have to do this. If you want to see her, you'll have a chance sooner or later. You don't have to secretly take photos of her, right? Moreover, Brother Zhang, you're an outstanding young man. You might be able to amaze the world at the Young Phoenix Gathering. If you really like Yi Piampian after the Young Phoenix Gathering, you should go to the headquarters and ask your senior brother to introduce her to you. You can take your time to pursue her. Who knows, maybe you'll have a good relationship with her." While I was talking, Zhang Wenfei was reaching for the jacket on the chair next to the bed to take out the photo. When he heard what I said, he fell off the bed with a plop. After a long time, he got up and said to me with a bitter smile, "Brother Zhou, you're really daring. That's Yi Piampian, a three-vein Earth Master. You might not even see one in a few hundred years. You're talking about a good fate. I'll be satisfied if I can see her twice in this life." Then, he took out an inch-long photo from his wallet and excitedly showed it to me. "See, I was right. She's much prettier than those celebrities. I think she's the prettiest woman in this world." I lowered my head to take a look. It was an ordinary photo. However, Yi Piampian was a natural beauty. The more ordinary a photo was, the more beautiful she looked. Although Zhang Wenfei was exaggerating, it wasn't unreasonable. She was much prettier than those celebrities. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.